Over the years, we've covered a lot of shows that originated in Japan, imported and adapted to the US market, some with greater fidelity than others. This is a compilation of several of those shows assembled as a longer video that showcases the differences and similarities of those properties. Incidentally, it also showcases the evolution of our show as well. This isn't all the Japanese shows that we've covered, and you may have already seen these episodes before. But Voltron together like this makes it easier to throw it on in the background while you build your next Gundam, keep your PJs on, grab a bowl of cereal, and have fun with Born in Japan Volume 1. Thank you to Sheath for sponsoring this video. Use promo code toygalaxy to get 20% off your order today. Regular boxers and briefs were invented hundreds of years ago by people who couldn't possibly have understood the needs of today's modern society and the demands we place on our underwear. It's not just about covering up, it's about providing cover, support, relief from our briefs. Sheath underwear was invented by a United States Army soldier during his second tour in Iraq, with all the dangers swirling around him like the heat, the absolutely sweltering desert heat. He focused his efforts on the things that were most sensitive, most precious, and made a plan to change his underwear. Sheath features separate compartments for maximum support and performance to prevent contact for long durations, which can build up heat and moisture, all wrapped in spandex with a designer eye-catching waistband that comes in a variety of themes, color schemes, and styles. Sheath has super fast shipping to get your package delivered. Click the link below and use code TOYGALAXY at checkout, or go to sheathunderwear.com/toygalaxy for 20% off. That's sheathunderwear.com/toygalaxy, or just click the link below and use code TOYGALAXY for 20% off. Thank you again to Sheath. Fire burns wood, sure. Water puts out fire in many cases, and wood beats water. Does it? It's 1987, and logic need not apply when you're marketing talking animals and robotic mech suits to the kids in America. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Battle Beasts. Like Transformers and Micronauts before them, Battle Beasts got their start in Japan at a little company called Takara. They were born in 1986, and since Hasbro already had their hands deep in the Takara cookie jar as the international distributors of Transformers, it didn't take much effort to dig in a little deeper and remarket Battle Beasts as well. Before coming to America, Battle Beasts were called Beast Formers and were a direct in-continuity part of the very well-established, very popular Transformers universe. While Hasbro has made some brilliant marketing moves in the past and continues to today, I'm going to file removing the connection to Transformers under not brilliant. In Japan, the Beast Formers lived on the planet Beast in the distant future of space calendar year 2011. And for the most part, everyone was about as happy as you might expect under the rule of a fantasy monarchy. They say it was nice, but it's hard to get around the royal media for the real story from the real people. You could create a lot of jobs with the money that goes into maintaining that royal palace. Just saying. Galvatron, leader of the Deceptichamps, starts a proxy war supplying weapons to a rebel faction led by Alligatron to rise up against the Autobot-friendly royal family, the Lion Clan, led by a white pirate lion named White Leo. Factions divide, for the most part, along species lines. Tree-hugging mammals to the Autobots, everyone else to the Deceptichamps. I think we can all agree that anthropomorphized animals in battle suits are both totally awesome, adorable, and can and did stand on their own as an action figure brand. But as a fan of Battle Beasts since 1987, I didn't know about the Transformers connection until nearly 30 years later. In Japan, Beast Formers were sold individually in boxes, echoing Transformers, and even included Autobot and Decepticreep faction symbols. Battle Beast, nay, Beast Formers, debuted on an episode of Transformers Headmasters entitled Rebellion on Planet Beast in 1987. I admit it took some time for me to adjust to the idea that I had been living for decades as a victim of a vast Western retail cover-up. What other pillars of my pop culture mythology are being buttressed by half-truths and sleight of hand? Battle Beasts were unique in their utter contempt for the rest of the civilized world as it moved toward greater articulation. With their 2 points of articulation, they proved that demands for more posability in action figures were total bullshit. Battle Beast minimized articulation in favor of a simple rock, paper, scissors gimmick that introduced a gaming element to the line, as well as powers for the characters within the narrative of the play story. It was a more complicated game in Japan that involved dice and stuff, but Hasbro knew American kids weren't going to want to do math. What is this, Dungeons and Dragons? What is this, I'm doing my taxes returns? What is this, know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em? Each figure featured a heat rub symbol that revealed their elemental-based power. Instead of rock, paper, scissors, Battle Beast used fire, water, and wood. The fire, water, wood trifecta also planted OCD seeds in many collectors, cursing them to pursue a collection of 228 figures instead of the core 76 because I needed to have each character in all 3 rub symbol variations. And then, later in the line, to help juice the sales, Battle Beast introduced a 4th rub symbol, the Sunburst. It beat fire, water, and wood and was only available on rare variants of Pirate Lion, despite marketing suggesting that any figure could potentially be a Sunburst figure. You bunch of lying liars. That is marketing malpractice. Also, I am still looking for you. Each of the 76 core figures came with a single weapon cast in some shade of silver, gold, bronze, and later shades of gray and purple. Each weapon is some kind of bladed or melee weapon, lots of axes and swords and maces, but if you watch that episode of Transformers, you will notice that their weapons also apparently shoot lasers, to which I say, why not? Some of the weapons are clearly themed to the specific wielder of that weapon, like the boomerang sword for the kangaroo guy, or the crab claw implement for the crab who holds it with his crab claw. Battle Beast had 3 different vehicles or chariots that looked like the heads of a ram, a reindeer, and a tiger. They could roll and had some chomping teeth, and there were 3 larger battle transport vehicles that opened up to form mini playsets and had animal forms of a firebird, a shark, and a beetle. For Series 4, the Laser Beasts were introduced in Japan by Takara with a new see-through orb or marble gimmick instead of rub symbols. Some of the Laser Beasts figures were produced under a Shadow Beasts subtitle for the Battle Beasts line outside of Japan, but it wasn't enough to keep the line moving. Shadow Beasts and/or Laser Beasts are some of the rarest and most expensive in the line to this day. Battle Beasts were big enough to merit a smidge of cross-merchandising. Cafeteria mogul Aladdin produced a plastic Battle Beast lunchbox, Imperial sold life-size roleplay costumes and weapons like Pirate Lion's sword, and Checkerboard Press published some coloring books. Blackthorn Publishing, who brought you the California Raisins 3D comic book, published 4 issues of a Battle Beast series that was intended to be longer than 4 issues, but Blackthorn went out of business due to their overinvestment in a 3D comic book adaptation of Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. In 2012, Takara Tomy released Beast Saga, the spiritual successor of Battle Beasts, as a line of toys, comics, video games, and cartoons. The figures maintained the same limited articulation, but swapped out the rub symbol or marble-based play gimmick for a 6-sided die that could be inserted into the figure's chest and had a more developed game mechanic. And in 2013, Diamond Select Toys produced a series of figures filtered through the lens of their Minimates line and supported it with a comic book series published by IDW. The future is as bright as it's ever been, jam-packed with potential. While Hasbro no longer owns the rights to the term Battle Beasts, they do still own the rights to the Transformers, and as long as the sun radiates heat and light, the Transformers will be in movie theaters. Given the connection to the franchise and the need to keep that franchise moving forward, it's only a matter of time before the Battle Beasts or the Beast Formers are introduced to keep the Cybertronian Civil War alive.
My job is to surprise everyone, to entertain them. Right now, I'm surprised and entertained.
Now, ジョージ・ルーカスを驚かせ、楽しませているもの。9ヘッドの高画質、ナショナル・マックロード・ムービー。
It's something new.
They hit the United States in 1984, but their history goes back a lot further than that. They were born in Japan, then repackaged for the United States. Oh, if only it were that simple. To tell this story, it's going to take Hasbro, Takara, Mattel, Marvel Comics, and of course, me and producer Greg. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of the Transformers, Volume 1. The Transformers were born in 1984 when Hasbro approached Marvel Comics with some new form-changing Japanese robot toys that they had recently licensed from Takara for the US market. Hasbro was hoping that Marvel could work the same kind of mythology-building magic that they had performed in 1982 with the successful relaunch of G.I. Joe. Jim Shooter, then editor of Marvel Comics, was told by a Hasbro executive that, quote, "The Japanese storyline associated with the toys wasn't useful. Japanese kids apparently don't require much justification. Cars become robots, robots become cars," end quote. As if that in and of itself wasn't enough of a hook. Here, in the future, I already know about the existence of Transformers, but if you told me that you were going to start another new line of toys where the only gimmick was cars become robots, robots become cars, I would still be interested because it is useful. But Marvel believed in the greater emotional connection to original characters with personalities more than the strength of the form-changing gimmick. Fine. Plus, it was going to be way cheaper to create names and personalities than it was going to be to engineer new toys from scratch. The Transformers is the name Hasbro gave to the collective line of transforming robots licensed from Takara. In Japan, it was actually two distinct but very similar lines, Diaclone and Microchange. Diaclone were robots that transformed into a variety of sci-fi space vehicles and later designs based on real-life cars. Microchange was a subset of the Microman line of figures that dates back to 1974. Microchange included robots that transformed into everyday objects to help the Microman heroes in their fight against evil. Of course, Microman was just a shrunk-down version of Takara's 12-inch Henshin Cyborg, which began in 1972 after Takara licensed the G.I. Joe body design from Hasbro. G.I. Joe began in 1964 when Hasbro tried to replicate the success Mattel was having with the Barbie business model. Sell the base figure and then sell lots of accessories that have a higher profit margin. Tracing the origin back that far means if you really love your Transformers, think a Barbie. Here's a quick and easy way to tell whether a G1 Transformer is from Microchange or from the Diaclone line. Tiny cockpits are Diaclone, everyday objects are Microchange. Optimus, the full-size cars, full-size jets, Insecticons, Diaclone. Megatron, Perceptor, Soundwave, Microchange. That method only works until about 1986 because once the Transformers hits big, Takara decides to end both the Microchange and Diaclone line to focus on producing Transformers. The Transformers introduced characters that have since become household names. Dennis O'Neil came up with the name Optimus Prime. Bob Budiansky filled in nearly everything else. Since 1984, Optimus Prime has been the noble leader of the Autobots and a self-aware being, but in Japan, he was Convoy, essentially just another mech to be piloted onto the field of battle like a Gundam, a Robotech Valkyrie, or a Macross Veritech. Megatron began life as a quirky special edition version of Gun Robo Walther P-38, designed to look like the gun from the TV show The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and that's his name. He's from the Microchange line, which meant he was really just providing backup and artillery for the Microman action figures, which were considered to be 1/1 scale at 3 3/4 inches. Gun Robo Walther P-38 U.N.C.L.E. edition doesn't have to worry about conservation of mass because that gun mode is how big he actually is. The bigger point here is if Marvel doesn't intervene and create new characters, you're watching movies about Convoy, the piloted mech suit the size of an actual real-life truck, and Uncle Gun Robo, who is the size of the actual G1 toy. It's a very short movie. You got the touch! Hasbro and Marvel's approach to marketing the Transformers was 3 parts, the same 3 parts they had used on G.I. Joe: toys, cartoon, and comic books. The Transformers comic book published by Marvel hit the stands in May of 1984 and functioned as the first and only ongoing mythology for the line for 4 months before the cartoon aired on television. Since the writers of the comics and the cartoons were not collaborating, the general concepts of the comics could be found in the cartoon, but the storytelling was vastly different. But after 7 years and over 80 issues of non-collaboration, the result was a comic book and cartoon that had distinctly different continuities. The comic began in May of '84, the cartoon began in September with a 3-part miniseries formally establishing the mainstream Transformers mythology. Autobots versus Decepticons, the Cybertronian War come to Earth, the 4 million years in sleep mode, their hunger for Earth's resources to be converted into Energon. Season 1 began the following month in October and would run for 13 more episodes into December, providing all the push needed to move a crap ton of transforming robot toys over the holiday season. Transformers were an unstoppable astro train and would be renewed for a second season of 49 episodes from September of 1985 through January of 1986. History records that in 1986, the first Transformers feature film hit theaters. It featured an all-star cast including Orson Welles, Robert Stack, the Micro Machines guy, Eric Idle, Judd Nelson, and Leonard Nimoy. It had a soundtrack that never stopped a rockin'. Literally, there is music playing for every frame of that film. It cost $6 million to make, and what else was I going to say? Oh right, they killed all the Transformers.
It is the year 2005, and a new evil threatens the galaxy in the most incredible adventure you've ever seen. Transformers, the movie. Souls need prime. Does prime die? Then who would lead the Autobots? And what is the secret of the monster planet?
It's so big, so exciting, you've got to see it twice to take it all in. Transformers, the movie. Rated PG, open to theaters everywhere in 3 days.
Look, cartoons, Transformers included, had spent decades setting expectations for what could potentially be included in a story, what was in bounds and what was out of bounds. Death, permanent death, was not one of them. By the end of a 30-minute episode, everyone is supposed to be back to normal, ready to tell another disposable 30-minute story the next day. Transformers didn't even make back its budget on its US release, and I don't know, maybe that had something to do with bad word of mouth and lack of repeat viewing after everyone's childhood heroes were murdered before their childhood eyes. You see things a little differently after that. After everyone died in the movie, the new era of the Transformers began. The business idea was to cycle out the product that was no longer being manufactured and bring in a new wave of characters to keep the line fresh and healthy. From a business perspective, that is obvious and makes sense. It was the right move at the time. Where Hasbro misread the audience was that the mythology that they had sold their product on had become real and valuable. The audience had grown up with these characters over those very formative 3 years. To remove their favorite characters from the series was to remove their interest in the line altogether. Live by the mythology, die by the mythology. Rodimus Prime, RC, Cup, Galvatron, all important characters in the ongoing mythology, but even Hasbro had to admit that they had made a mistake in killing Optimus Prime. After a letter-writing campaign that I would love to see samples of, Hasbro brought Optimus Prime back in a 2-part season finale called The Return of Optimus Prime in 1987, and they've never killed him off again since.
You got the touch. You got the power.
Generation 1, as it is now referred to, ended in 1990 in the United States, but continued on through 1993 in Japan. Several factors contributed to the end of the era. Most of the original audience had grown up and moved on to things like sports and jobs and cars, maybe higher education. I don't know what they were doing. Transformers transforming were a toy gimmick in and of themselves. The puzzle nature, the duality of the toy was the initial selling point, the way to attract the attention of 10-year-old consumers. The mythology was what Hasbro hoped would keep that attention. When properly saturated, even a kid's interest in transforming robots can wane, so from the beginning, Hasbro had to keep the pressure on Takara to keep delivering variations on that transforming gimmick. Dinosaurs, construction vehicles, bugs, triple changers, sextuple changers, fortresses, robots with heads that change into other robots, robots with guns that change into other robots, robots who hide inside organic shells to conceal their transforming robot bodies. And eventually Transformers action figures that didn't even transform, a sign that the brand had transcended the form-changing gimmick to be recognized as a proper name, a species, a pop culture icon in and of itself, no longer centering the characters over the form-changing gimmick. But at that point, by the 1990s, the market was pretty heavily saturated with all manner of transforming robots, and the US audience was superhero crazy after the success of Tim Burton's Batman movie in 1989 and the complete media takeover of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was time to put the Transformers on hold for a few years to regroup and rebrand. Transformers, robots in disguise, because what are the odds you'll get tired of playing with a robot and a Lamborghini at the same time? It's a defense mechanism first and foremost, but it's also job security. Technologically modified superheroes in colorful themed supersuits battling against invasions of giant monsters and robots from distant galaxies, spaceships, razor blade boomerangs, kung fu, gunfights, race cars, motorcycles. No, I'm not talking about Star Wars. I mean, if you like Star Wars, you're going to love this because it's basically, practically, almost exactly like a kind of Star Wars. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Battle of the Planets. Battle of the Planets is an 85-episode animated series that ran from 1978 through 1980. It features a superhero team called G-Force, comprised of 5 incredible young people, all orphans, tasked with protecting this galaxy from alien attacks initiated by other galaxies, specifically from a force called Spectra from the planet Spectra, led by Zoltar and their boss, the Luminous One. Always 5 acting as one: Mark, Jason, Princess, Tiny, and Kiop, each possessing superpowers and abilities through their physical enhancements and the technology they utilize, not the least of which is their wrist-mounted transmuting devices and their bird-themed uniforms. Operating from their underwater base called Center Neptune, they are guided by a robot named 7-Zark-7 who constantly monitors the known universe for possible threats that may require the unique skill set of G-Force. They travel across the galaxies in a fantastic spaceship called the Phoenix that also acts as a transport for their individual vehicles and, as an absolute last resort, has the power to turn into a giant flaming bird to extract the team from just about any predicament that they find themselves in. Battle of the Planets was created by Sandy Frank, a veteran of television production since the 1960s.
Sandy Frank, he's the source of all our pain.
It was produced by Sandy Frank Enterprises, but it was produced by Tatsunoko Production. Created by, produced by, what's the difference? In 1972, Tatsunoko Productions created Gatchaman, an animated series about 5 technologically modified young people with incredible powers protecting the planet and its natural resources against attacks from outer space. 105 episodes were broadcast in Japan from 1972 through 1974. It was a successful and beloved series and has remained an important brand in Japan, inspiring reboots and even a live-action movie in 2013. In 1977, 3 years after Gatchaman concluded its Japanese run, it was showcased by Tatsunoko at the Marché International des Programmes de Télévision, or MIPTV. MIPTV is kind of like the Cannes Film Festival, but for television products. Everyone who has a show that they want to market internationally shops it around to see if there's interest in the license. Sandy Frank attended MIP in April of 1977 and took an immediate interest in Gatchaman, so much so that he acquired prints of some original episodes to watch at his leisure back home in the States. He kicked around some ideas, but wasn't fully inspired to take action until that summer, when Star Wars premiered and absolutely redefined everything in every industry that touched film or television production. Every television station, every movie studio, every creator was trying to find the next Star Wars, or something that could be sold in a manner related to Star Wars. If your elevator pitch didn't include the phrase, "It's like Star Wars, but," then you weren't going to get very far with anyone willing to invest their cash in your idea. Licensing Japanese cartoons for adaptation in the United States wasn't anything new. Gigantor, Astro Boy, and Speed Racer previously made the trip over in the 1960s. Change beyond the names of the characters was and always will be a factor due to both the localization of the stories and the differences in broadcast standards from Japan to the United States. There are always going to be cultural or historical references in the Japanese versions that the US audience won't understand that will have to be explained in a different way or removed altogether. What is considered appropriate for young viewers in Japan may be considered too violent, too graphic, too mature for US viewers. Sandy Frank licensed the full international rights to Gatchaman with few exceptions: broadcast, merchandising, music, publishing. Anywhere he could potentially market the show to profit, he had the rights to do so as long as Tatsunoko got their cut. And he wanted to go a step beyond localization for the US market. Sandy wanted to reach that Star Wars audience, and to get there, Gatchaman was going to have to transmute into something like Star Wars, but after the necessary edits were made to satisfy broadcast standards, removing excessive violence, on-screen deaths, and profanity, however tame by today's standards, the production found themselves with a peculiar dilemma. The total runtime for the episodes was shorter than was necessary to be broadcast. They were going to need to create some filler, and also, there weren't many planets involved in this Battle of Planets. To give the show more of an intergalactic feel, to push it into an even more Western science fiction product, to appeal to the 8 to 11-year-olds newly enamored with droids and spaceships, and to fill time, a new character and episode framing device unique to Battle of the Planets had to be developed. Newly animated scenes featuring 7-Zark-7, his dog 1-Rover-1, and an overly sexualized, disembodied female voice called Susan would move the stories along when the original footage from Gatchaman could not be used for reasons.
Center Neptune control, 7-Zark-7.
Hello, Zark.
This is Susan at Early Warning out on planet Pluto.
These new animation sequences also provided G-Force with a futuristic underwater base where 7's Arc 7 would operate from, and the team could reside when they were not on a mission. Additional time was filled with footage of various outer space environments, space travel, and the means to sell the idea that G-Force was actually leaving one planet and heading to another. Can't have a Star War without stars.
各勇者隊出動ニューゴッドフェニックスのメカニズム全公開 G1 号から15号を搭載発進シアーダウンダブルヒンジアクションウィング確認法火の鳥君は火の鳥を見たかデラックスコピニカニューゴッドフェニックス発売中コピニカガッチャマンシリーズをよろしく
Sandy Frank leaned heavily on industry connections. Several voice actors who were working for Hanna-Barbera and on radio and television joined the Battle of the Planets production. Casey Kasem, Alan Young, Janet Waldo, Ronnie Schell, Alan Oppenheimer, and featuring Bill Woodson as the narrator.
Mark, look! There's Zoltar!
Get him! I'll get to his spaceship. The rest of you look after Greg.
The theme song was composed by Hoyt Curtin, whose work you may recognize from the Johnny Quest theme song, the Super Friends theme song, the Flintstones, the Jetsons, and lots of other cartoon themes and episode music. While Sandy Frank Enterprises owned all the rights to Battle of the Planets, their focus was on the production of the animated series and selling it to television affiliates across the United States. Unlike most superhero-themed brands from the 80s and 90s and today, where a toy line is an essential component, if not the essential component of the production, Battle of the Planets merchandise from the 70s and 80s is scarce, beautiful, and, I hate to say it, boring. There are a few books, a board game, puzzles, gas station toy guns, but no action figures, no playsets, no Ben Cooper costumes, no all-encompassing multimedia strategy that would become the norm in the 80s. That lack of exposure, the door-to-door sales approach to TV affiliates, the lack of presence in major TV markets across the country certainly prevented Battle of the Planets from rising to the ranks of brands like G.I. Joe, Transformers, or Masters of the Universe in the United States just a few years later. Episodes of Gatchaman were re-edited, reformatted, redubbed to form the 85 Battle of the Planets episodes. Sandy Frank had intended to use all 105 Gatchaman episodes and may have even been making plans for episodes beyond the initial 105. Ultimately, the Tatsunoko team wasn't able to provide the final 20 episodes in time, and 85 was enough to go into syndication. When they ran out of material, Sandy Frank found an appropriate ending point and, choosing not to invest any more money into development of its continuation, wrapped production of the series. Despite the lack of a toy line, Battle of the Planets had some limited reach outside the cartoon. Vintage Battle of the Planets comics were published by Gold Key Comics. Years later, just in time for the 25th anniversary of its debut, Top Cow Comics published a series of Battle of the Planets comics, which would not only use elements from both Gatchaman and Battle of the Planets, but would also cross over with the Witchblade and Thundercats franchises. In 2001 and 2002, Rhino Entertainment released 12 of the original 85 episodes of Battle of the Planets on VHS and DVD. DVD versions also had the corresponding episode of Gatchaman. At the same time, Rhino released an Ultimate DVD box set with the same 12 episodes of Battle of the Planets and Gatchaman, as well as interviews with some of the cast, crew, and an alternate version of the packaging that included an unhelmeted Jason action figure. Because in 2002, Diamond Select Toys finally delivered a full line of moderately posable action figures for the entire G-Force team, including mini replicas of their individual vehicles and unhelmeted variants. Diamond also helped solicit 12-inch versions of Mark and Jason figures made by Medicom Toys in Battle of the Planets branded packaging, and Takara offered a Cygirls Princess figure that would see very limited distribution. Even on their 25th anniversary, the brand still struggled to make any significant, lasting cultural impact in the West. In 2003, Sandy Frank began exploring a revival of Battle of the Planets. The working title was Battle of the Planets: The New Adventures of G-Force, and the plan was to redub some of the original episodes with new voice actors, re-edit them again, leave in more of the original material, and then also give those elusive final 20 episodes of Gatchaman the Battle of the Planets treatment. The intent was to gain some momentum and hopefully deliver a series of Battle of the Planets compilation films, re-edited and redubbed in the same manner before the international license expired. But after one episode, it was considered too expensive and far too risky a venture without wider support. So the project was shelved before even being given a chance. In 2007, the Sandy Frank-owned international rights to Gatchaman expired. Battle of the Planets and all the rights thereto officially reverted back to Tatsunoko Productions. In 2013, Sentai Filmworks licensed the rights to Gatchaman and thereby Battle of the Planets and released the entire Gatchaman series, all 105 episodes, on 22 DVDs. It was now possible for Battle of the Planets fans to see the original series, the original source material, in its original unedited form. In 2014, the Nelvana, D-Rights, and Tatsunoko team that brought Beyblade Metal Fusion to the world at large announced Battle of the Planets Phoenix Ninja as a complete reboot of the Battle of the Planets franchise due out in the fall of 2017. The fall of 2018, currently slated for the fall of 2019. An episode list can be found at the Gatchaman Fandom Wikipedia site. Battle of the Planets lasted a full 85 episodes in its original broadcast, then remained on the air in syndication into 1985. A success even if its cultural impact today is less than those of its contemporaries. Soon after its initial run, Sandy Frank teamed up with Ted Turner and Turner Broadcasting to redub and re-edit the entire Gatchaman series again, with new voices, mythology, and all the inappropriate bits put back in. It was called G-Force Guardians of Space, and even though it was more faithful to Gatchaman than Battle of the Planets had ever been, it found a way to alienate itself from both the Gatchaman purists and the Battle of the Planets fanbase. But the story of G-Force Guardians of Space will have to wait until we cover it next week.
あのヴァンパイアを放った暗黒の宇宙からとてつもない恐怖が舞い降りた。奴らは一体何をしにやってきたのか。驚異のスペースサスペンスホラー、スペースインベーダー。7月2日の試写会に抽選で200組400名様をご招待いたします。ご覧の宛先まではがきでお申し込みください。
There are lots of different ways to tell a story beyond the chronological order of events. Maybe you want to add some drama. Maybe you want to focus on the funny parts. Maybe you're afraid an audience won't understand all the reasons things happen, so you add or subtract elements to a degree that doesn't change the intent. Maybe you purchase the exclusive international rights to that story for a 30-year period, and after 10 years, it's time to refresh the brand to maintain interest and potentially reach out to untapped markets around the world. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of G-Force Guardians of Space. G-Force Guardians of Space was an 85-episode animated series about 5 teenage champions fighting for good over evil, fighting to defend planet Earth from deadly enemies from space, 5 secret agents each possessing superpowers and abilities through physical enhancements in the technology they utilize, not the least of which are their wrist-mounted transmuting devices in their bird-themed uniforms. If this all sounds familiar, if this all looks familiar, there's a very good reason, and the best way to tell that story is from the beginning in chronological order. Gatchaman was created by Tatsunoko Productions. 105 episodes aired on Japanese television from October of 1972 to September of 1974. Over in the US in 1977, the exclusive international rights to Gatchaman were purchased by Sandy Frank, who re-edited, redubbed, and rebranded it as Battle of the Planets, featuring a team of heroes called G-Force, which at the time was an obvious name for the team but would lead to much confusion in the coming years. 85 episodes of Battle of the Planets originally ran in the United States from 1978 to 1980. For more about the history of Battle of the Planets, check out our video, The History of Battle of the Planets. Meanwhile, back in Japan, 52 episodes of the official sequel to Gatchaman, called Gatchaman 2, aired from October of 1978 to September of 1979. It was followed by 48 episodes of Gatchaman Fighter from 1979 to 1980. Both timelines could have ended there, but Battle of the Planets managed to stay alive through reruns into 1985. Which brings us to 1986 on the timeline. G-Force Guardians of Space aired a few episodes for 1 week in the US that summer, and then it was gone from United States television. However, G-Force Guardians of Space continued to be broadcast around the world. The dramatic interpretation of that story will be told at the conclusion of the chronological events of this story. In 1994, a new original video animation called Gatchaman was released in Japan. In 1997, that OVA was released on home video. while in the US, all 85 episodes of G-Force Guardians of Space were finally broadcast on Cartoon Network from 1995 to 1997. At the same time, in 1996, a show produced by Saban Entertainment called Eagle Riders aired 65 episodes internationally, but only 13 episodes within the United States. Eagle Riders skirted Sandy Frank's exclusive international Gatchaman rights because it was based on Gatchaman 2 and Gatchaman Fighter, not the original Gatchaman. The costumes were the same as the ones in Battle of the Planets and G-Force, but all of the mecha were different. Eagle Riders was a different show, based on different properties, and something we'll probably cover at some point in the distant future. And finally, in the US, in 2000 and 2004, Cartoon Network once again ran select episodes of G-Force Guardians of Space to confuse a whole new generation of fans. Is G-Force Gatchaman? No. Is G-Force Battle of the Planets? No. Well then, what is G-Force?
We'll blast G-Force from the skies! Firebird mode! Now, Hootie, fly! This time we've got you, G-Force! Attack! What a maniac! I'll show him! Oh,
We are G-Force.
you cat! He's from G-Force! Get him! What's happening to the ship? Okay, let's go! G-Force!
G-Force Guardians of Space is a dead entity lost to time. Months of production, translation, voice acting, graphic design. It is the hours of dedication and sacrifice by dozens of skilled artists and technicians poured into a dream born from love and respect for the original source material and the hope for a new era of a misunderstood mythology. It is a second chance to do what is right, to bring the world a more complete experience of a beloved national treasure, a masterpiece borrowed from a foreign land, ultimately discarded, unreclaimable time and talent written over by decisions of the past and the machinations of unfeeling legal resolutions. See, after Sandy Frank's Battle of the Planets concluded its run in 1985, Sandy continued to look for ways to profit from the Gatchaman license, which still had 22 years left on it. Things had changed quite a bit from 1978 to 1985. Television standards and practices had relaxed. There were things you could show on television that you couldn't show just a few years earlier.
I warned you! I tell you!
There was more to Gatchaman than the Western audience had been exposed to. A lot of the more intense, more mature subject matter had either been softened or removed altogether for Battle of the Planets. The production team had focused on safely marketing to kids as opposed to maintaining the integrity of the original Japanese product. Turner Broadcasting System, aka TBS, was one of the last networks to host Battle of the Planets reruns into 1985. They partnered with Sandy Frank to license Gatchaman in order to develop a new modern translation of Gatchaman that they could have some ownership of, and so the work began. TBS initially contracted the Media 360 Group, based out of Atlanta, to create a pilot sometime in 1985 for G-Force Guardians of Space. They used an episode of Gatchaman called The God Phoenix Reborn, but were purposely not supplied with Tatsunoko Productions' translated script and had to create the plot and dialogue from scratch with no guidance. While Turner seemed to be pleased with the finished product, it was also deemed a direction too expensive to take, and Turner Program Services moved on. To date, only a few minutes of the Media 360 Group pilot is available online, uploaded to YouTube in 2012, with the rest considered lost. After the Media 360 Group attempt, TBS then hired Fred Ladd, a legend in the Japanese animation, translation, and localization, to take a shot at G-Force. He was the guy who helped make Astro Boy, Gigantor, and Kimba the White Lion into consumable Western media. He was also the guy who originally passed on Battle of the Planets. See, in 1978, when Sandy Frank was developing Battle of the Planets, Fred Ladd was one of the first people offered the job of translating it for US television. He declined the opportunity given the difficulties of coordinating such an effort from the opposite coast. He lived in New York, the work for Battle of the Planets was being done in LA. But G-Force Guardians of Space was a second chance for everyone, a potentially more faithful version of Gatchaman, and an opportunity for Fred Ladd and TBS to put their mark on the franchise. Everything Sandy Frank had added to Battle of the Planets that was not a part of Gatchaman, including 7 Zark 7, 1 Rover 1, Susan, Center Neptune, the voice actors, logo design, and, unfortunately, the Hoyt Curtin theme song, were all gone. Everything. Except the name G-Force. The G-Force production team started over from scratch with the original Gatchaman source material, the original 105 Japanese episodes and scripts, out with Casey Kasem, in with on-screen violence. While the intent was to make a more faithful translation of Gatchaman, there's still a lot of G-Force that has nothing to do with Gatchaman. For instance, all of the character names are changed seemingly for no reason, certainly not to be truer to the source material. One might go so far as to say that the names belie the maturity of the original mythology. Ken Washio of Gatchaman became Ace Goodheart. Joe Asakura is now Dirk Daring. June is now Agatha June. Jinpei is now Pee-wee. And Ryu Nakanishi is now Hoot Owl. Hootie to his friends? Yes, part of this translation of Gatchaman, part of making it more relatable to the Western audience, was to replace a common Japanese name, Ryu, with Hoot Owl. Hootie to his friends. The TBS Fred Ladd translation of Gatchaman was named G-Force Guardians of Space and aired for one entire week in the summer of 1986. And then it was replaced with reruns of Gilligan's Island in a move known as hedging your bets. Gilligan was a proven commodity. Gilligan got results.
I warned you! I tell you!
Strange to run a show that so much development had been put into just to pull it after a week, but perhaps that was the plan all along. The US market had its fill of Battle of the Planets. Did they really want to watch another translation so soon after they had moved on from the first translation? From 1986 through 1995, G-Force Guardians of Space was sold to television markets all around the world. The one-week test run had theoretically provided TBS with the ability to both satisfy any contractual obligations related to premiering the series in the US and being able to sell it as a show that had been on US television. Perhaps you saw the Spanish version, Fuerza G, Guardians del Espacio, or maybe you were in Portugal watching G-Force, Defensores de Espacio. Maybe you saw the Polish version, Zolaga G, or maybe even a dubbed version in Russia, Turkey, or Sweden. In January of 1995, G-Force Guardians of Space finally aired on US television 9 years after being developed. It was the first Japanese animation program to be broadcast on Cartoon Network, and it landed there thanks to Cartoon Network's owner, Ted Turner of Turner Broadcasting. G-Force Guardians of Space would be joined on Cartoon Network by other Japanese animated programs like Robot Carnival, Vampire Hunter D, Twilight of the Cockroaches, and Speed Racer. While none of the shows were ratings breakouts, they did help lay the foundation for Cartoon Network's series Toonami and its focus on Japanese animation. G-Force Guardians of Space found itself in an unfortunate position. It was attempting to appeal to two fan bases that were reluctant to embrace it. Fans that had grown up with Battle of the Planets didn't quite connect with the tone or the new voice acting, assuming that it was a kind of updated or modified version of Battle of the Planets as opposed to a unique entity unto itself, which it was. Fans of Gatchaman, the original Japanese creation, could not be satisfied with anything short of a direct export of the original series fully intact with, at best, subtitles. Despite the efforts made to release a Western version of Gatchaman that was closer to the original than Battle of the Planets had been, it had still wandered too far to be considered legitimate. G-Force was attempting to be the bridge between the two fan bases, but had become disposable to both. A small selection of G-Force episodes would be broadcast intermittently on Cartoon Network in 2000 and again in 2004. However, in 2005 and 2006, ADV Films released a complete collection of all 105 episodes of Gatchaman fully intact to the US market. With fans now having access to the original series as created, any previous Americanized versions had become immediately, irreconcilably obsolete. And in 2007, all international rights to Gatchaman and Gatchaman derivative properties reverted to Tatsunoko. That means both English translations of Gatchaman, Battle of the Planets, and G-Force, and everything unique to each production were now the property of Tatsunoko Productions. In 2013, Sentai Filmworks acquired the North American video distribution rights and, in a partnership with Section 23 Films, released the entire 105-episode Gatchaman series again on DVD and Blu-ray, further digging the hole that Battle of the Planets and G-Force were buried in, just a little deeper. G-Force Guardians of Space is the Biff Tannen timeline. It is essentially a lost version of a series that was able to correct itself as the true reality. With Gatchaman once again being the dominant franchise around the world, the one thing that is being promoted by the original rights holder, there is no reason for G-Force Guardians of Space to exist. The music, the names, the branding, some of the episodes were included on some of the home releases, but everything else related to it is furthermore irrelevant. It is highly unlikely that G-Force Guardians of Space will ever see another release by a company that doesn't need it for an audience that doesn't want it. It is simultaneously one of the best and worst examples of what is possible when it comes to the creation of a toy line and its evolution. One of the best because it was way ahead of its time, capitalizing on some of the best features of popular toy lines from around the world. One of the worst because it relied so heavily on reboot, recycling, and the exhaustion of all earned emotional capital over the 4 decades of its existence until all that was left were echoes. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Micronauts. Micronauts was a full line of action figures, vehicles, and playsets from Mego that first hit shelves in 1977. The figures were highly articulated, helping set a standard for posability and playability that was ahead of its time. And furthermore, Micronauts featured modular parts that allowed you to customize the look and function of the toys to suit your adventures. Innovative pocket-sized robotic action figures with futuristic spaceships, robots, moon bases, all of that supported by a series of Marvel comics helping to establish a mythology that grew from the toys, a formula that Marvel would utilize to its great benefit over the years that followed. The very short version of the Micronauts origin story is that they were licensed from a previously existing Japanese toy line, repackaged for the US market, and supplemented with original figures and vehicles. Regionalization, that is, the renaming of characters and places, redubbing of voices, and omission of culturally unrelatable scenes, was and is a common practice for cartoons, movies, and toys that are successful in one country, imported into another. Regionalization was responsible for introducing the United States to Japanese franchises like Speed Racer, Gigantor, Star Blazers, Astro Boy, and lots of others. It is far cheaper than coming up with something original on your own. That said, Mego's Micronauts were the result of more than just regionalization, but to get to that point, we have to go back a lot further. Mattel had a significant financial success with the creation of Barbie in the early 1960s. Hasbro recognized there was a formula that could be applied to a military and adventure-themed toy, the same way Mattel was applying it to a fashion toy. Sell the base doll, then keep the revenue stream flowing with supplemental outfits, accessories, vehicles, and playsets. G.I. Joe, the first official action figure, was introduced by Hasbro in 1964. G.I. Joe was a huge financial success and attracted the interest of other toy manufacturers from around the world. By 1971, Hasbro had licensed the body, name, and supplemental merchandise to Palitoy in England and Takara in Japan. In 1972, Takara reformatted that G.I. Joe base body into something that was a bit more relevant to the Japanese consumer. Instead of an American military man, a new mythology was developed for a line called Henshin Cyborg, essentially a robot who could henshin, or transform into other superhero characters through the use of supplemental costume kits or other functions via modular limbs and weapons similar to Ideal's Captain Action. And then in 1973, the global oil market exploded for reasons that I'm not going to get into here. All you need to know is that A, oil is necessary for the production of plastic, and B, over the course of a single year, the cost per barrel of oil increased 400%, forcing companies that manufactured plastic items to reconsider how and what they made. In 1974, Takara shrunk Henshin Cyborg down from 12 inches to 4 inches and introduced a new line called Microman. Similar concept with respect to modularity, less emphasis on changing into other superhero-type characters, more opportunity to design and sell vehicles and playsets, and, not for nothing, but smaller figures take up less space in general. All signs pointed to it being the correct practical evolution of the line. The geniuses at Takara also had the brilliant idea that these figures were not miniature representations of Microman characters, they were the actual size of the Microman characters. They were called Micros and came from the planet Micro-Earth, and while on our Earth, full-size Earth, they disguised themselves as action figures. This would be a key factor years later in 1983 when Microman evolved into Microchange and incorporated robot allies that could henshin or transformer into everyday objects like tape recorders, microscopes, and guns. In 1976, Mego was absolutely dominating the United States action figure industry. They were the manufacturer of toys and collectibles for the most popular shows and movies, from Planet of the Apes to Happy Days to Starsky and Hutch and Wizard of Oz. Their world's greatest superheroes and comic action heroes offered two different scales of figures and included characters from Marvel and DC. They owned the rights to a multitude of popular celebrities like Sonny and Cher, Farrah Fawcett, and Diana Ross. Looking to continue their expansion and dominance of the market, Mego got an early look at Microman toys that were going to be shopped around to potential US distributors and immediately bought the rights and the physical tooling used to make the toys. It was different than anything else on the market at the time and would allow Mego to establish a new, unique, cutting-edge identity in the toy aisle. Mego renamed the line Micronauts and had them on display in early 1977 and on the shelves for sale later that year. Most of the initial offerings were direct repackages sampled from 2 years' worth of items already produced by Takara for Microman. Mego attacked the airwaves with commercials and print advertisements, selling kids and parents on the look and the versatility of these colorful, new, highly articulated, interchangeable toys. The draw was the innovative play structure, not so much the mythology. We knew that the Micronauts were the good guys and the Acroyers were the bad guys. Have fun, make the rest up yourself. Series 1 featured a variety of figures in a variety of colors and made from a variety of materials. Time Traveler, Space Glider, Galactic Warrior, and Acroyer, deluxe robots like Biotron and Microtron, vehicles like the Galactic Cruiser, the Photon Sled, the Warp Racer, and the Hydrocopter, the Astro Station spaceship, and even the Star Station playset. Sales were immediately very, 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 very good. Mego instituted an internal policy of buying up every science fiction license that came on the market to protect their golden goose, or even anything that might be a competitor that might threaten the Micronauts market. Logan's Run, bought it. 1 Million BC, bought it. Doctor Who, bought it. The Flintstones, bought it. Happy Days, bought it. King Kong, bought it. Flash Gordon, bought it. Superman the movie, bought it. Kiss, bought it. Star Wars, we'll come back to that. In 1978, Mego created a few original characters that were a slightly larger scale and had some unique features compared to their Japanese counterparts. Force Commander and Baron Karza, the leader of the Micronauts and Acroyers respectively, utilized a previously existing mold with a magnetic connection system. Both were based on the Japanese figure of Kotetsu Jeeg. Jeeg was part of the Microman Titans subline and, for the US, was remolded in red and white for Force Commander and black and red for Baron Karza, each getting a unique new custom head, each getting a matching horse that they could combine with.
Ouch.
1978, a new base character design called Pharoid, new ships, and a new battlecruiser. 1979 would see the addition of more robots that were slight retools and recolors of existing robots. Biotron was now Phobos, Microtron was now Nemesis. And 1980 would see Mego push into a new era of Micronauts with new characters and an unforgettable visual style.
We'll return after these messages.
You can pretend this is the transportation system of the future. Rocket tubes with automatic parachute jump and launch pads. The electric air power terminal lets you blast up, down, forward, and back again. Plus, you can build a towering parachute jump and plane launching pad. Or any other layout you can dream up. Even run it in the dark. Rocket tubes with automatic parachute jump and launching pad. Assembly required by Mego.
Mego introduced alien characters that were not reuses of Takara parts. However, they fit right into the look and feel of the line. Centaurus, Kronos, Membros, Repto, and Antron, all unique styles of aliens and standouts as action figures. The aliens and vehicles from that wave featured artwork by Ken Kelly, who had made a name for himself after his work was featured on the Kiss album Destroyer. He was and is a brilliant and prolific horror, science fiction, and fantasy artist whose depiction of those alien toys and vehicles have become inseparable from the Micronauts brand. In 1979, Marvel Comics began publishing a Micronauts comic book after writer Bill Mantelow's son received some of the toys as a gift. Bill was so inspired by the toys, he brought them to then editor-in-chief Jim Shooter and sold him on acquiring the license and letting him write the book. The core of the concepts and many of the characters are based on the toys themselves, but Bill didn't limit himself to just those pre-existing designs. He sought out to create a fully realized world that wasn't restricted to just the items that were in production or could even necessarily be produced. It established a formula for Marvel Comics, literally helping create and reinforce the mythology for a line of toys, a formula that they would repeat with brands like Star Wars, G.I. Joe, and Transformers. The Micronauts were officially from a place called the Microverse. Commander Arcturus Ran has been on a 1,000-year voyage, his body held in space sleep while his mind is merged with his robo-body double Biotron. When he returns to his home, he finds that Baron Karza has risen to power, supplanting his own family as the rulers of the realm. Baron Karza gained his power, his superpower, and, well, his armored form through his control of the body banks. See, to incorporate the modularity of the toy line, the official mythology features body banks, places where uber-rich folks can upgrade their physical forms to extend their lives while poor people are utilized for their parts and stuff. It is too close for comfort right now, Marvel. Commander Ran, who is basically modeled after the Space Glider figure, joins forces with his co-pilot Biotron, a robot called Microtron, and an Acroyer named Acroyer because Acroyer is a race of beings named after the guy named Acroyer, which is him. They are joined by characters not based on any of the toys, including Princess Mari, one of the last surviving members of the royal family, and Bug, an insect-like humanoid alien creature. They star in 59 regular issues and 2 annuals from 1979 to 1984, and then in a second title, Micronauts The New Voyages, 20 issues from 1984 to 1986, not only running longer than the entirety of the Micronauts' life on shelves, but also existing mostly after Micronauts had already disappeared from shelves. For a good 2 years, 1977 and 1978, Micronauts were a powerhouse without a realistic threat in the toy aisle. At its peak, Micronauts accounted for nearly 30% of Mego's total revenue, an estimated $32 million out of the $110 million total. But that changed in 1978 when Kenner delivered Star Wars with a Death Star-strength beam of irony. See, legend has it that Mego, the company known for licensing everything even remotely science fiction related specifically to protect Micronauts, passed on the rights to Star Wars, allowing it to fall into Kenner's lap. Now, in recent years, as late as 2019, Marty Abrams, the owner and brains behind Mego, has pushed back on that story, saying that the rights were never offered to him in the first place because he absolutely, definitely, positively would have bought them He said that he was out of the country doing licensing stuff when the Star Wars rights were being shopped and it was all just bad timing and bad luck. In his defense, Micronauts did really well. In 1977, it was hard to argue that Micronauts wasn't the right investment compared to the unproven Star Wars. It wasn't until Star Wars became a worldwide pop culture phenomenon in the years that followed, and Mego had to file for bankruptcy after the entire toy market shifted to anything and everything related to Star Wars, that it became clear that it wasn't the right choice. Mego had bet all that Micronauts money on electronic toys. They invested heavily in research and development. They had also been taken to court by Kenner in 1980, who claimed that Mego stole their Stretch Armstrong technology for use in their Elastic Heroes line of stretchable toys. If only Mego hadn't passed on the Star Wars license by being out of town and never having been offered it. Micronauts was officially discontinued in 1980, which was followed by the complete dismantling of the company and sale of all assets in 1982, which was performed in a questionable manner and did land Marty Abrams in jail for defrauding the company. Mego's molds were dispersed to the ends of the earth. Our Toys bought a bunch of them and immediately turned out a line of toys called interchangeables. Same stuff, different colors, cheaper materials, clogged the shelves with toys that kids had already moved on from. Pack Toys bought some stuff and released the Lords of Light line of figures. For more on that, check out our video, Can You Help Solve the Lords of Light Mystery? But no pop culture phenomenon stays gone forever, right? In 1997, Marvel Comics took another swing at Micronauts, greenlighting a series by writer Sean Burry and artist Carrie Nord. Updated character designs, modern approach, 5 issues worth of scripts were written, 3 were penciled, but Marvel wasn't able to acquire the license and the series was canceled. In 1998, Abrams Gentile Entertainment, AGE for short, the company co-founded by Marty Abrams after the demise of Mego, announced a new 5-part Micronauts animated series to be aired on the Sci-Fi Channel in 1998. It would tee up a 26-episode series that would air in 1999, maybe on Fox, maybe other places. There was going to be action figures, Marvel comic books, probably lunchboxes and stuff. That too was canceled, but this time for being too ambitious, for reaching too far, for dreaming too big. Plans were for a show that featured a mix of CG animation, live-action actors, probably some animals, special effects, green screen, sunscreen, food services, spared no expense. They were even going to have a line of technology-based toys in 2000s, maybe like light zappers or something. We'll never know. In 2002, Image Comics took a turn. They managed to run Micronauts through 11 issues and a 4-issue Baron Cars Limited series before that all got canceled as well. That same year, Palisades Toys acquired the license to reissue the original Micronauts toys using the original molds, but surprise, the original tooling and molds were no longer owned by AGE, and Palisades was forced to reach out to the collector community to acquire vintage pieces to try to recreate molds to use in manufacturing the line. The reissues were a mix of some Takara originals and some of the Mego creations as well, but the hassle of getting them made was just the beginning. The reissues were produced at a factory that utilized subpar materials. The result was fragile and defective figures. Palisades attempted to recover by switching factories and delivering a stronger product in Wave 2, but retailers and fans were already scared away by the first wave. The Micronauts fiasco was a major contributor to Palisades' own bankruptcy in 2006. And this is a good time to talk about generation loss. This is the phenomenon by which each successive copy produced from a copy of an original results in a diminished quality. The first copy is pretty good, almost indistinguishable from the original, but the copy of that starts to show flaws. Those flaws are compounded with each new copy of a copy. Just a thing I thought I'd bring up in the middle of this video. Anyway, in 2004, Devil's Due Comics stepped into the batter's box, took a swing, and delivered 3 issues with art by one Mike Broderick, who had been an artist on the original Marvel series back in the 80s. Unfortunately, while additional issues were solicited, none would be delivered as the book was canceled. In 2005, state-of-the-art toys showed off their new prototypes for a 6-inch line of Micronauts figures. The idea was to release in late 2005, but by 2006 they were still shopping those initial concepts around. Lobros, Baron Karza, and Space Glider were prepared for launch, but in 2006, SOTA president Jerry Macaluso was enthusiastic but also realistic about the state of the collector figure market at the time. Unfortunately, even though he considered funding the line with his own cash, SOTA was unable to raise enough retailer interest to get the figures produced before their license expired, and the line was canceled. There's a saying about toy lines that I invented that goes, you either die independent or you live long enough to see yourself acquired by Hasbro, which Micronauts was. And in 2011 at New York Comic Con, Hasbro rolled out a single issue intended to tease a new shared universe of Hasbro products called Unit E. Action Man, Gem, Transformers, Battleship, Mask, ROM, Stretch Armstrong, and Micronauts. That too was canceled. The time to go from announcement to cancellation getting shorter and shorter, as if a Micronauts announcement itself had become the only way to determine whether there was consumer interest in the brand as constituted. It was Schrodinger's toy line. The only way to know if it was dead or alive was to announce that it was back, but by then it was too late. It had already been canceled. In 2015, IDW Publishing announced a series of comics that would feature characters licensed from Hasbro, ROM, and Micronauts. But it's okay, this time it worked out for the most part. 11 issues plus tie-ins with other IDW books. That was followed up by 5 issues of a Baron Karza limited series. That's a success. It worked. Everything's okay now. We did it. In 2016, Hasbro released a special limited edition reproduction set of classic Micronauts toys for San Diego Comic-Con. Galactic Warrior, Pharoid, Orbital Defender, box art by Ken Kelly. They played the hits that the fans wanted to hear. In 2017 at San Diego Comic-Con, they released an exclusive box set of crossover Hasbro brands related to the Revolution series of IDW comics. Transformers, Mask, G.I. Joe, ROM, Action Man, Visionaries, and Micronauts. Included were tiny non-posable microfigures of Baron Karza, Acroyer, Biotron, Oberon, Quintilis, Fenolo Phi, Zant, Betatron, and Gamatron. They also announced that a new animated series was in development intended for release in 2019, and I'm not exactly sure where that's at right now. Not sure if it's canceled, but it is 2020 and I haven't seen anything yet. But look, forget all that. Well, don't forget it. We worked really hard on this. Just put it aside for a sec. The true measure of a toy property's legacy is a feature film. In 2009, Hasbro announced that Micronauts was now part of the Hasbro family of brands and that, fingers crossed, J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot Productions was talking about maybe possibly considering to produce at some point a movie based on or related to the Micronauts or Micronauts adjacent concepts. And then 4 years later, Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick said this, quote, "We've written a couple of drafts of Micronauts and it's in the Paramount system now. We developed it with Bad Robot and it's probably not what you might imagine a Micronauts movie to be. It departs from the comic wildly, so if you hope it's loyal to the comic, you'll be disappointed in that particular sense. However, it's very, very different and very, very cool," end quote. As of 2015, Paramount was pretty sure that they were still probably going to make it at some point. Unless they needed to think bigger. In December of 2015, The Hollywood Reporter reported that BFFs Hasbro and Paramount were building the Hasbro Cinematic Universe. G.I. Joe, Visionaries, Mask, ROM, and Micronauts. That was followed by another announcement that an all-star batch of writers was doing something with all these properties, maybe even writing. In December of 2017, Paramount changed the release date for whatever they were making from October of 2020 to June of 2021. 2 years later, in 2019, Dean DeBlois was announced as the writer and director of whatever the film is that will inevitably get canceled. Micronauts, man. A brand that currently exists as the byproduct of a series of cascading, compounding reboots and reconceptualizations with a half-life approaching absolute zero, which is unfortunate because it was without question one of the most popular, most innovative, and most successful toy lines of all time. It was 4-inch scale before Star Wars, it was highly articulated before G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, it was transformable before Transformers, it was a Marvel comic before any other toy line-based series from Marvel Comics. It returned home to Hasbro after a 40-year journey around the world from G.I. Joe to Henshin Cyborg to Microman to Micronauts.
The Headmaster 指揮官クロームドーム発進見よロボットがヘッドに変わるクロームドームヘッドオン胸のパワーでデストロンを倒せトランスフォーマーザ・ヘッドマスターズクロームドーム登場
It is the product of Eastern and Western mythology combined to form one super mythology. Born in the West, inspiring the East, returning home in a brand new package. The Western mythology of law enforcement packing more punch than ever, their jurisdiction expanded to include the entire universe and any parallel dimension that might seek to intrude on ours. Cowboys and giant robots. No, cowboys as giant robots. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Saber Rider and the Star Sheriffs. Saber Rider and the Star Sheriffs is a 52-episode animated series that originally ran from September of 1987 to September of 1988. It resembles but is legally distinct from the adventures of the Galaxy Rangers and Bravestar. As humans have moved deep into space, the fringes of the galaxy itself are the new frontier. Cavalry Command serves to protect every planet from threats that might disrupt the peace, but none more dire than the Vapor beings. Also called Outriders, they have shifted dimensions into our reality in pursuit of natural resources and, as long as they're here, total domination. Star Sheriffs are the individual intergalactic law enforcement officers who wield military-grade weapons and utilize highly advanced technology to fight back. However, they are increasingly at a disadvantage to the even more advanced technology of the Outrider threat. Our robot horses are no match against their giant mech robots. Cavalry Command circles the space wagons and digs deep into their lockboxes to fund and develop a prototype giant robot super ultimate weapon whose deployment on the battlefield will tip the balance in favor of humanity in what could be the last stand for our existence, a special freedom fighting unit. They named him Ramrod, a peacekeeping vehicle shaped like a huge cowboy. The Ramrod Equalizer unit is a giant heavily armed spaceship that, when activated during the challenge phase, can transform into a giant heavily armed robot with a robot cowboy hat and a robot cowboy cape. The four pilots relinquish control to Ramrod as he cries out, "Head 'em up, move 'em out, power stride, and ready to ride." And then, together, they absolutely destroy all monsters. The Star Sheriffs are an international cooperative. Their leader and the show's namesake, Saber Rider, hails from Great Britain as indicated by his accent and the Union Jack flag on his helmet that itself is evocative of a Queen's Guard bearskin hat. He's an expert swordsman, marksman, and friend to robot horses. Steed is his personal robot horse that accompanies him into battle. Steed can run at incredible speeds, leap incredible distances, fly through space, and sustain damage well in excess of organic horses. Shinji Fireball Hikari is an expert racer from Japan as indicated by the Japanese flag on his helmet. He drives a space race car called a Red Fury Turbo Racer, essentially a high-speed six-wheeled battle SUV. William Colt Wilcox is from the United States of America as indicated by the flag on his cowboy hat helmet. He has his own fighter ship called Bronco Buster. He's a bounty hunter, pilot, expert marksman, and ladies' man hot on the trail of the Vapor creatures who killed his parents. The team is brought together by April Eagle. She is not only the daughter of Cavalry Commander Charles Eagle, but also the designer of Project Ramrod. She has a robot horse named Nova and presumably hails from France, as indicated by the French flag on her helmet. Each member of the team controls specific functions of Ramrod. Saber Rider handles overall command, Fireball is the pilot, Colt handles weapons deployment, and April is navigation. Together they are the galaxy's best and last hope against Nemesis, the mastermind behind the Outriders and their incursion into our dimension. Saber Rider and the Star Sheriffs was created by World Events Productions. I say created by because it's the same kind of created by that brought you shows like Voltron, Robotech, and Battle of the Planets, or should I say Beast King Go Lion, Super Dimension Fortress Macross, and Science Ninja Team Gatchaman, respectively. There's a previously existing show in Japan, licensed, imported to the Western market, and rebranded with heavy edits to the story and overall narrative in the interest of selling advertising and associated merchandise. In fact, World Events Productions had success with this formula by adapting Beast King Go Lion and Armored Fleet Die Rugger 15 as two different versions of Voltron in 1984 and 1985. Attempting to replicate that success, World Events Productions licensed Star Musketeer Bismarck, created in Japan by Studio Pierrot. They developed characters, situations, and dialogue that were mostly consistent with the animation available, rearranging, eliminating, and duplicating segments where necessary. World Events Productions went a step further than many East to West localizations and created 6 additional episodes that were not part of the original series in order to smooth out some of the story elements that they weren't able to reconcile with the existing footage.
アローストライカー発進行けドナテルドロードレオンローオフロードタイプのダイナミックなカースタイリングロードレオン3台のマシンにクラッシャーガンポット I ビームビーム砲搭載ロードレオンドナテルドアローストライカー発売中
There are some significant differences between the two series. Saber Rider in Saber Rider is Richard Lancelot in Bismarck. While he is an important part of the team, he's not the leader. Saber Rider's Fireball is Bismarck's Shinji, the actual center character because, he's from Japan. Saber Rider's Colt is Bill Wilcox in Bismarck. April is Marianne Louvre, and her father is Charles Louvre. She and her father are, without a doubt, French in Star Musketeer Bismarck. Instead of Vapor beings called Outriders led by Nemesis, the collective of beings in Bismarck is called Deathcula led by Huza, and they're from really deep space, not an alternate dimension. Years ago, they attempted to invade the Earth Federation government's expanding territory and were thwarted by forces including the father of Shinji Hikari, aka Saber Rider's Fireball in the Bismarck version. In Bismarck, Huza's body is lost and he has his consciousness transferred into a giant computer with a physical cybernetic body. He intends to destroy the Earth Federation systems even if it costs him the entirety of his own forces and homeworld. The circumstances that find the 4 Star Sheriffs, the Bismarck crew members, are slightly different, but the results were obviously the same. The real changes were made to center the Western characters and to accommodate the strict standards for television programs aimed at the target demographic in the US versus Japan. In Japan, the market was viewers up to age 16. Shows that depicted death and some lightly adult situations and language were expected. In the US, a show like that would be targeted to a much younger age group, and therefore all of that stuff would have to be removed. In Saber Rider, instead of dying, Vapor beings were returned to their dimension, leaving an exitory residue behind them. Language is easily rewritten, any romantic moments can be cut at kissing, saloons now serve soft drinks, and you're just going to have to trust me when I say that these monsters are doing really bad stuff to innocent people. All of the characters were recast for Saber Rider to record the dialogue for the new scripts. The cast featured some of the biggest names in voice acting at the time and still today. Rob Paulson as Saber Rider, Pat Fraley as Fireball, Townsend Coleman as Colt, BJ Ward, Tress McNeil, Neil Ross, Arthur Berghard, and Peter Optimus Prime Cullen as the narrator and voice of Ramrod itself. And while we're on the subject, can we please cut the giggling, okay? This is a professional production we run here. This is a presentation with educational merit, and frankly, I'm disgusted by the display of immaturity. Ramrod is a real word.
Ramrod is a real word.
It is a word for the long, rigid shaft that you use to drive the ammunition down the barrel of a muzzle-loading firearm after you've compacted the propellant. It is no more deserving of your childish reactions than dipstick, cockpit, or dongle. Saber Rider and the Star Sheriff's theme and episode music was composed by Dale Shacker. It was popular enough with fans that it was released on a 2-volume CD set. Saber Rider and the Star Sheriffs was intended to be a full rollout just like Voltron. Star Musketeer Bismarck was ripe with action figures, roleplay accessories, and transforming robots in multiple scales at a variety of price points. Toys were intended to hit the Western market. Bismarck clothes, puzzles, mugs, chopsticks, Gashapon quarter machine prizes, but to the best of our knowledge, none of that made it to the US. There are images of some items that were rebranded with Saber Rider logos and names, but no evidence that any of those items were released at mass retail. While World Events Productions learned a lot from their Voltron rollout, that too had been messy at best. Toy releases were split between Matchbox, Panache Place, LJN, and that wasn't necessarily the fault of World Events Productions. Licensing in the early 1980s was like the Wild West. Japanese properties everywhere being claimed by American producers with nothing more than a handshake and drinks over lunch. Hard to know who owned what and what they were legally allowed to do with it. And none of it mattered as long as there was some cash to grab for even a brief window. Everyone clamoring to be the one to grab a popular, established Eastern brand to remake into something they could sell in the West. Some of the legal fallout from this era is still being sorted out today. Several episodes of Saber Rider and the Star Sheriffs hit VHS, even more on DVD. In November of 2008, the first DVD set was released by VCI Entertainment. It was followed by a second set in August of 2009 and a third later that year in October. Fans of Saber Rider and the Star Sheriffs would have to wait until 2016 to see their heroes in comic books. Lion Forge Studios brought Saber Rider back in a 4-issue miniseries written by Margaret Scott and Sendall Arts. It was good? Bad? You're gonna have to let me know because I just found out it existed. In 2010, a German independent game developer called Fire Hazard Studio announced that they were working on an officially licensed Saber Rider video game. They showed off an early preview at E3 in 2011 and then shenanigans! Probably those darn vapor beings from the alternate dimension. The studio collapsed, and then in 2014, a new studio with many of the same people called Team Saber Rider took over. They announced that they were developing for all the systems: Nintendo 3DS, Wii, Wii U, PlayStation 3, PlayStation Vita, Xbox 360, iOS and Android, Dreamcast, and the TurboGrafx 16. They ran a Kickstarter campaign from August to October of 2015. Over 1,000 people contributed over $96,000. The game was targeted for a 2016 release. However, in January of 2017, Steam Greenlight announced that Saber Rider was going to be released Q3 2017. If only it weren't for whatever caused the delays on top of delays. The last public updates we could find were from September of 2018. The commenters on the Kickstarter are not happy. There is a playable demo somewhere, but that's the end of that story, and the project appears to be dead. In 2019, MEP Toys announced a new line of Saber Rider toys to be released in 2019, but that too appears to have been wishes whispered unto the universe in the hopes that miracles are real and wanting something to be true is as good as doing the work to make it so. Their blog has not been updated since March of 2019. There is no reboot, no shared cinematic universe, no Netflix animated series in development. Hasbro is not pursuing the rights and IDW isn't interested. There are no Kickstarters currently ongoing to fund a tabletop role-playing game. Saber Rider and the Star Sheriff suffered from being a face in the crowd on two fronts. They were another East to West translation at a time when television was packed with East to West translations, all paling in comparison to the popularity of Transformers. And it was one of 3 different shows that had attempted to present audiences with an action-packed sci-fi space adventure reinterpreting Western Old West tropes through a filter of Eastern visuals and storytelling. Had Galaxy Rangers, Bravestar, and Saber Rider hit 2 or 3 years apart, they may have had a shot. Together, they guaranteed each other's demise. In the midst of a 1990s superhero renaissance, a team of modern-day samurai appear in magical armor to face the darkest forces of evil. A little bit Power Rangers, a little bit Voltron, a little bit Ninja Turtles. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Ronin Warriors. Ronin Warriors is a 39-episode animated series that aired in the United States beginning in 1995 with rebroadcasts in 1996 and 1999 on the Cartoon Network and the Sci-Fi Channel. It centers on a team of 5 teenage magic samurai warriors, heroes in feudal helms, Bushido power. 1,000 years ago, the Demon Emperor Talpa crossed over from the Netherrealm and succeeded in his mission to rule the living world. His armored physical form, powered by terrible dark energies, rendered him impervious to all human weapons. His might was supreme, his rule seemingly infinite. Until one day, a solitary warrior of virtue and justice emerged, the Ancient One. Drawing upon mystical forces from beyond with his tiger, White Blaze, by his side, the Ancient One defeated Talpa, casting him back to the Netherrealm. Talpa's spirit was imprisoned, but his horrible dark armor remained. Talpa's armor could not be destroyed. The Ancient One knew that the only way to keep Talpa's spirit imprisoned, to assure that he could not reclaim his armor, was to break it into smaller pieces, diffusing its power and entrusting the 9 separate suits to 9 warrior families. And for 600 years, the 9 families kept the armors safe. But Talpa began searching for the armors. 4 were simple, as they had fallen into the hands of weak men with weak hearts who lusted for power. Even in his weakened state, Talpa could manipulate them with ease. They became his dark warlords: Anubis, Deus, Sekhmet, and Kale. By the late 20th century, Talpa was strong enough to begin his campaign of revenge and once again attempt to conquer Earth. But first, he was going to have to deal with the new owners of the remaining 5 armors, 5 teenagers of exceptional strength, fortitude, honor, and wisdom. Ryo, Sai, Sage, Rowan, and Kento are all that stand between the complete domination of our world by the powers of the Netherrealm. Talpa, ruler of the evil dynasty, and his dark warlords will wait no longer. They will bring death, destruction, and tyranny forever, unless the Ronin Warriors can stop them. Ronin Warriors was an English adaptation of the Japanese animated series Yoroiden Samurai Torupa, or Legendary Armor Samurai Troopers, which was broadcast in Japan from April of 1988 to March of 1989, 7 years before it arrived in the US. Legendary Armor Samurai Troopers was co-produced by Sunrise Animation and Nagoya TV. It was created by Hajime Yatate, or in Japanese, Yatate Hajime, who isn't a person, it's more like an idea. Hajime Yatate is the collective of creators at Sunrise Animation, sometimes referring to the writers, sometimes referring to the animators, sometimes referring to the entire team. It draws its inspiration from a literary work of Japanese poet Matsuo Basho called Oku no Hosomichi, or The Narrow Road to the Deep North. Koreo yatate no hajime toshite ikumichi naho suzumazu. This was the first time I used my travel writing implements, and I was still reluctant to venture farther. In other words, Hajime Yatate can be loosely translated as the first time, or the beginning, a great name for the team of creators bringing a vision to life for the first time. Sunrise and Nagoya TV were looking to get into the armored superhero action after the wildly successful Toei-produced Saint Seiya animated adaptation of the wildly successful Saint Seiya comics. Saint Seiya drew its magically powered armor inspiration from Greek mythology. Legendary Armor Samurai Troopers pulled from multiple sources. 5 good and 4 evil armors are based on tenets of Neo-Confucianism mixed with Bushido. Each armor possessed a specific component of power with a corresponding power set and color coding. Loyalty, serenity, piety, and obedience for the bad guys, justice, trust, wisdom, life, and virtue for the good guys. The popularity of Legendary Armor Samurai Troopers in Japan made it an easy target for adaptation in other international markets, especially after the explosion in popularity of Saban's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers in 1993. Suddenly, importing pre-existing brands was hot again. Everything you need is there. You don't even have to re-edit everything for localization purposes. You can just re-record the dialogue in a different language, and that's what happened. Graz Entertainment licensed it, Sinar distributed it, the voice acting cast members of Ocean Productions in Vancouver dubbed it. It was renamed Ronin Warriors and rolled out for first-run syndication in the United States for the summer of 1995. And for what it's worth, Ronin Warriors is known for being a particularly faithful adaptation of the original Japanese series, where previous imports like Macross as Robotech, Go Lion as Voltron, or Gatchaman as Battle of the Planets had been heavily altered to make them palatable for the young Western audience. Ronin Warriors just used different theme songs. And look, there's a lot of characters in this story, and it would take way too much time to go through all of them individually. Their stories, their powers, their finishing moves, their relationship status, their specific Bushido-inspired significance in the mythology. It's too much. There's the 5 Ronin Warriors, Ryo, Rowan, Kento, Sai, and Sage, the 4 Dark Warlords, Anubis, Sekhmet, Kale, and Deus, Talpa, the Ancient One, Blaze the White Tiger, the Ronin's friend Mia, the 8-year-old boy Yuli that she takes care of, Batamon, Lady Kyura, Mukala, all of them sharing a comparable amount of screen time. Screen time? On top of that, there are English names, other international market names, and the original Japanese names. For instance, in the English version, he's Anubis. In Brazil, he was called Demon. His original Japanese name was Shutendoji, which, by the way, is the name of a Japanese demon which the Ronin Warriors could have easily defeated in the traditional Japanese manner by throwing roasted soybeans at him, or get a beans cannon. What a savory way to go.
Samurai Warriors, aquí están. Héctor, Tommy, César, Jorge, Tristán. Defensores de la tierra contra la dinastía del mal. Guerreros con misteriosos poderes samurái y asombrosas armaduras, dotadas con un arma secreta que dará el golpe definitivo a la dinastía del mal. Samurai Warriors son de Ojeda, juguetes para compartir.
I don't want to spubble Mr. Bubbles' tubtails for you, so we're just gonna... Did I say soil?
You said spubble.
Fresh off his performance as Raphael in 1993's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, Ryo was played by Matt Hill, who you might also recognize as the Game Master himself, Captain N. Or perhaps your ear is catching the hammer-headed jab from Head Shark! The Ancient One was brought to life by David, sometimes Optimus, sometimes Megatron K. Talpa was played by Mina E. Mina. The rest of the cast featured Jason Gray Stanford, Michael Donovan, Ward Perry, Scott McNeil, Paul Dobson, Jane Perry, and Matt Smith, among others. After its initial run in 1995, Ronin Warriors would return in 1996 on the Sci-Fi Channel and then again from 1999 through 2001 as part of Cartoon Network's Toonami Midnight Run and Rising Sun. In 1995, Playmates Toys released a whole line of Ronin Warriors action figures licensed from Bandai's Samurai Troopers line, covered head to toe in removable armor accessories. Each figure had power coil inner spring articulation in their arms and legs, which lets you deliver powerful strikes to all your other action figures. 11 figures in all, which, if you do the math, is more than you would expect if non-armored characters like the Ancient One, Mia, Yuli, and the Tiger White Blaze are excluded from the line, which they are. Talpa, Anubis, Kale, Sekhmet, and Deus for the evil side, Ryo, Rowan, Sai, Sage, and Kento for the good side. What's the 11th armor? Who is Hariel? Legend has it that Hariel was one of the few alterations made to the Samurai Troopers mythology for the Western audience. See, when the situation demands more than just the combined efforts of the 5 Ronin warriors, 4 of the warriors, Sai, Sage, Rowan, and Kento, can temporarily transfer their powers entirely to Ryo, who can then fuse all 5 powers together Voltron style. In the show, Ryo's red armor, called Armor of Wildfire, turns white, shifts shapes, and takes on the new, nearly uncontrollable, superpowered appearance called Armor of Inferno. With respect to the toys, it's a white armored figure with Ryo's head on it. This white armor was included in the line since it was part of the Bandai line, but Playmates thought it needed a new name so as not to confuse it with the other Ryo figure already offered in the line. Can't have American shoppers thinking there's 2 of the same guy in the line. Might not buy both of them. Dan gestures to 9 different Optimus Primes on the shelf behind him. So the Armor of Inferno, the combined form of the Ronin armors, was said to have previously been worn by a character named Hariel, who was both a Dark Warlord and a Ronin warrior. Also, his spirit might still haunt the combined white form of the armor, which explains why it can be difficult for Ryo to control. There were no original comics produced in the Western market for Ronin Warriors, but the Japanese manga adaptation was collected into various releases from 1988 through 1990, many of which could be acquired in other markets by the time Samurai Troopers was adapted as Ronin Warriors. In Japan, there were several supporting novels and audio dramas for Yoroiden Samurai Troopers, as well as 3 animated sequel chapters in 2003 titled Gaiden, The Legend of the Inferno Armor, and Message, a total of 11 new episodes. In 2004, Bandai Entertainment released a Ronin Warriors complete collection, which featured the entire 39-episode series on double-sided DVDs. One side has the original Japanese version, the English version on the other. The set also includes all 3 of the animated sequels. In 2015, Discotek Media released the series again on DVD, but this time with English subtitles and no 1995 Ocean redub, potentially a rights issue where they could acquire the visuals, but not Ocean's audio. But if you don't feel like tracking down and paying for the physical media, you can watch the entire 39-episode series on a variety of online streaming services, including Retro Crush TV, Tubi TV, and Amazon Prime Video. Some of those services also have the 3 animated sequels. To this day, Ronin Warriors still has an active fan base which has been recognized by action figure companies in Japan. Doyusha has released 6-inch scale model kits. Sentinel and Bandai have both released modern 6-inch scale versions of some of the characters from Ronin Warriors. But they are expensive. There is a market for these figures, but it's limited, and the prices reflect that. In July of 2020, massive multiplayer online role-playing game Ragnarok Mobile teamed up with Samurai Troopers for a crossover event. Minigames, combat, in-world events, character skins, all themed to Samurai Troopers or Ronin Warriors, whichever your pleasure. Ronin Warriors was popular in Japan before it came to the West, but once it did, it connected with the Western audience as well, helping to introduce another generation of animation fans to the anime experience. It capitalized on the trends that had already been pushing forward in the West with superhero television shows and toys like the X-Men, Ninja Turtles, and Power Rangers. It was a bridge from the visual aesthetic and narrative pacing that evolved through the 80s and 90s, setting the table for all the bigger, bolder series of the early 2000s. It centered a team of teenage superheroes around principles of Eastern philosophy and religion, and didn't sacrifice any of it for the international audience. A rare, near-perfect translation, a new beginning for superheroes and for anime itself.
テレビマガジン一月号こちらが火を吹く完全なりきりマスク不意に
語なる隠れんジャー超忍法帳。かっこいいぞ。パチパチタートルズもこりゃ面白い。隠れんジャー秘密100、まだまだ楽しさいっぱいだよ。全員サービスはなんと隠れんジャースーパービデオだ。テレビマガジン1月号発売中。
It is an epic near-future anti-Star Wars drama played out with giant humanoid battle robots, a glimpse into the next evolutionary stage of humans, and a ratings failure that launched one of the most successful brands in history and a Japanese national icon. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Mobile Suit Gundam. In the 40-plus years since Mobile Suit Gundam first aired, Gundam has become one of the biggest franchises on planet Earth. We cannot possibly cover it all in a single video. Even limiting this video to just the first iteration, just Mobile Suit Gundam, there's still too many comics, games, books, toys, model kits, spin-offs, prequels, Gashapon sneakers, hats, school supplies. I don't even have time to finish the list of things we don't have time to cover. Mobile Suit Gundam was a 43-episode animated series that first aired in Japan in April of 1979, forever changing the giant robot cartoon market, altering the expectations of the genre, rearranging the idea of what a war with robots could be. It was transformational. It is the 79th year of the Universal Century, a calendar that began when the population of Earth had grown to the point of unsustainability, necessitating the creation of orbiting space habitats, each housing tens of millions of people. Space colonization was supposed to be a way to relieve the burden on the planet, to give everyone the resources they needed to live, but it also gave humanity a new place to wage the same old wars. The space colonies located furthest from Earth have declared themselves the Principality of Zeon, a self-governing nation-state independent of the Earth Federation, who control the Earth, the Moon, and all of the other colonies in orbit. To go with their declaration of independence, Zeon has also launched a war of independence. Despite being outnumbered by Federation forces, Zeon has the military advantage through advanced technology, namely their mobile suits. Giant humanoid robots piloted by soldiers, enabling them to deliver artillery that would normally require a battleship or space fighter. See, in this future, long-range combat tactics are hampered by a new type of radiation that can be projected onto the battlefield. Minovsky particles disrupt all types of signals: navigational, tracking, homing, infrared, radar. So, if you want to fight, you have to get up close and put your eyes on the target. The early stages of the war cost both sides half of their respective populations, but the Earth Federation has been working on a response. They have developed a prototype mobile suit called a Gundam with even better advanced technology than the Zeon mobile suits. Better handling, faster, stronger, equipped with weapons that no mobile suit has ever been capable of carrying. It will be supported by White Base, a new Pegasus class of military spaceship, which all sounds great until the Gundam and White Base are sent into battle crewed by teenagers and civilians. Because all of the trained soldiers, pilots, and engineers are killed in an ambush, because war sucks, and even if you win, everyone loses. Amuro Ray, the 16-year-old pilot of the Gundam, the son of the guy who invented it, will find himself learning on the fly as he goes up against the best the Zeon forces have, including the best mobile suit pilot in the entire galaxy, Char Aznable, the infamous Red Comet, known for his speed, devastating battlefield prowess, and body count. Furthermore, both Amuro and Char will discover that they are so good at what they do because they represent a paradigm shift in the evolution of human beings. They possess an extrasensory perception, an ability that makes them even more proficient at conducting war in a giant robot suit in outer space. Emergent, profoundly unique beings that will come to be known as new types. War is hell, and sometimes there are no good guys and bad guys. Rather, there are varying degrees and forms of oppression, abuse, and structural inequality. For those on the battlefield, civilians or combatants, the enemy is whoever is on the other side of the gun, or in this case, whoever is in the belly of the other mobile suit. Mobile Suit Gundam was produced by Nippon Sunrise. It was created and directed by Yoshiyuki Tomino, featuring characters designed by Yoshikazu Yasuhiko and robots and ships designed by Kunio Okawara. All three had established themselves within the animation community in Japan, and more specifically with robot cartoons, giant super robot cartoons. By 1978, Japanese cartoons were saturated with giant super robots. Robots with mysterious, sometimes magical origins. Robots with mysterious, sometimes magical powers. Deimos, Voltus V, Danguard Ace, Guy King, Combattler V, Raiding, Getter Robo, Grandizer, Mazinga Z, some of which Tomino, Yasuhiko, and Okawara were responsible for. In fact, all three worked on the Nippon Sunrise series, Zambot 3, and Daitarn 3. That experience dovetailed into the development of Mobile Suit Gundam. Tomino wanted to do more with the genre and more with animation. He wanted to tell bigger, more important stories than defeating the monster of the week. He was done with super robots. Time to introduce real robots. Tomino wanted to tell a story about war, how it develops, how it rages, how it destroys people and lives and the environment. He wasn't looking to do more children's fantasy. For inspiration, he considered concepts that had been presented in the 1959 science fiction novel Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein. Not that he necessarily agreed with the themes of the novel, but it sure did give him a lot to think about with respect to what a Star War might one day look like. In particular, he sure did like the idea of a mobile infantry-powered armor suit and thought those concepts could be applied to the more realistic giant war robots he was planning for his new show. Initially developed under the working title Space Battle Group Gunboy, Tomino pulled inspiration from other projects. An admitted fan of Space Battleship Yamato, he imported a design Kunio Okawara had originally intended for Daitarn 3 and refashioned it as the White Base or Pegasus ship which supports the Earth Federation forces. The name Gunboy would evolve into Gundam as the story crystallized. Legend has it that Hajime Yatate, a name given to the collective of writers and artists working on the project, had developed the name Gundam as a combination of the words gun and freedom. Heck, where I'm from, we just call that USA of America. Legend continues that Tomino modified Gundam into Gundam, invoking a hyper-romantic lone savior ideal that a single soldier with a strong enough gun could hold back the enemy the way water is held back by a dam. A gun dam. That robot went through some evolution as well. Tomino originally conceived of the mobile suit as a tool of war and assumed that it would be decorated as such. A nice low visibility gray, or black and gray, or gray with either deep red or maybe purple accents. But that's when show sponsor Clover Toys stepped in. Clover, who until very recently hadn't been a toy manufacturer at all, was on a hot streak with brightly colored, chromed out, missile-firing, fist-launching, transforming toys from shows like the aforementioned Zambot 3 and Daitarn 3, which Tomino, Yasuhiko, and Okawara worked on. Tomino knew that the only way a cartoon like this gets to TV is if it's sponsored by a toy company. And the only way the toy company is going to sponsor it is if they think they can sell toys. Clover requested some cosmetic changes to the main robot. Start with white, add some red, add some blue, add some yellow, add some chrome. We love chrome. There were a variety of scales and degrees of functionality produced, from simple soft vinyl toys to complex die-cast and chrome showstoppers, firing fists, firing missiles, feet with wheels where none previously existed. Gundam was accompanied by two other Earth Federation mobile suits, the two mobile suits that historically were developed prior to the Gundam itself. The question is it gun cannon? Yes! One of them was Gun Cannon, and of course the other one was Gun Tank. Clover also produced toys for the Pegasus ship White Base and several of the Zeon forces. For Tomino, it was like making toys of the deconstructive comics masterpiece Watchmen. Who would do that? Tomino absolutely hated the new look. He thought it broke his real robot war concept before anyone even got to see it. No real military would paint mobile suits their weapons of war like that. It would be a sitting duck. Why don't we just rename the show Gundam? I'm paraphrasing, of course. In a sense, Tomino was right, but so was Clover. Ratings weren't great overall, but the real problem was the show wasn't moving toys. The older audience that was watching wasn't buying the toys, and the kids who would have been interested in the toys had no connection because they weren't watching. Mobile Suit Gundam was originally scheduled for 52 episodes, but Clover pulled the plug at episode 39. It doesn't matter how good the show is if you don't have the financial support from the sponsors. Thanks again to Sheath for sponsoring this video, but Tomino and crew were able to negotiate one more month to hastily wrap up the story. Mobile Suit Gundam was canceled after 43 total episodes, seemingly ending the real robot era of animation before it began. However, in one of the most prescient business decisions ever, just as the toys were languishing on the shelves, headed for the clearance bins, Bandai licensed the rights for model kits based on Mobile Suit Gundam. Bandai had been in the model kit business since 1971 and knew that the teens who were watching Gundam were also the teens who were building model kits. The interest in the model kits drove interest in the reruns drove the sales of the model kits, interest in Gundam overall increased. In 1981, Tomino was given a second chance to tell a story a little closer to his original vision. The 43 episodes of Mobile Suit Gundam were edited down, then divided up into 3 separate films to be released theatrically. Some of the original animation was replaced with scenes or vehicles that Tomino believed to be more appropriate to his vision instead of Clover's. Special editions, if you will. Even less super robot, even more real robot. Mobile Suit Gundam and Mobile Suit Gundam Soldiers of Sorrow were released in 1981. Mobile Suit Gundam Encounters in Space in 1982. It is estimated that around 15,000 people showed up for the premiere of Mobile Suit Gundam. It was so crowded that police and the media were concerned that it could turn into a riot. It is known as the day that anime changed. The 3 releases combined to bring in nearly 5.5 billion yen, which is... You're just gonna have to trust me on this. It was a lot of money in 1981 and 1982. Bandai's model kits were on the shelves. They were far less expensive than the toys and far more appealing to the audience that was going to the theaters to see the movies. They didn't have much articulation. They were molded in a single flat color. The kits had to be glued together, then painted. But they sold well. Profits were great and people wanted more. More kits, more characters, more Gundam. It is not an exaggeration to say that the introduction of Gundam plastic models, or Gunpla, saved the franchise.
歴史を塗り替えるためにあまたの勇者が消え、そしてまた英雄が生まれる。ジョニー・ライデン少佐。今またフルアーマーオペレーションガンダム部隊との壮絶なる戦闘へ。機動戦士ガンダムバンダイのプラモデル。
That's Spider-Man screeching, not me. I'm fine. I'm fine. Bandai's new president, 35-year-old Makoto Yamashina, son of former Bandai president Naoto Yamashina, wanted to capitalize on the growing popularity of Gundam in Japan and around the world. And what better place to make a statement than Hollywood, California, in the US of Americans? In 1983, Bandai representatives, on behalf of Makoto Yamashina, approached Lionsgate Film to see if they could collaborate on a Mobile Suit Gundam feature film. Lionsgate Film is a studio founded by writer-director-producer Robert Altman in 1970 after the success of MASH. It is completely unrelated to Lionsgate Entertainment that was founded in 1997. Lionsgate reached out to screenwriter Chip Proser to write a movie treatment for Gundam. Proser was known as a sci-fi and military movie script doctor, the guy that turns the rough draft into the shooting version. In the future, he would write Inner Space and do a major rewrite of Top Gun, but not yet. Proser agreed to write the Mobile Suit Gundam script with a caveat: he wanted to direct it as well, something he had never done before. But Lionsgate agreed. Proser went to Japan to meet the Gundam team and get to know the mythology, then he got to work. Legendary science fiction artist Sid Mead was hired to develop some of the concept art. Proser completed a first draft of the script, which included several recognizable beats from the original Gundam concept, supplemented with healthy doses of Star Wars and the Magnificent Seven. Since you and I are from the future, we know that the film was never finished. It was barely started. Apparently, Bandai hadn't properly cleared the film rights with all of the appropriate rights holders. If you're up for a glimpse into what might have been, the script is available online. Once Gundam was embraced as a household name in Japan, the sky was the limit on licensed merchandise. An entire economy grew from its popularity. I can tell you that a lot of manga has been produced depicting the events of the original series, alternate perspectives, fill-in stories. The One-Year War and the Universal Century timeline have been incredibly fertile ground for over 4 decades. I cannot possibly name them all here. Yoshiyuki Tomino himself wrote the first novelizations of Mobile Suit Gundam. From 1979 to 1981, 3 books were published depicting a version of the story that was more detailed, more mature than the animated series, and thereby closer to Tomino's original ideas. There are minor changes like the name switcheroo of the Pegasus-class ship White Base now being a White Base-class ship called Pegasus, and major changes like Amuro already being in the military when the story begins as a sergeant major in the Earth Federation forces. The novels were translated into English in 1990 by Frederick Schott, published by Del Rey Books. The English versions were released again in 2004, but this time as a single book called Mobile Suit Gundam: Awakening, Escalation, Confrontation. It had revisions, of course, most notably the correction of discrepancies from the first publication. In 1990, Char's name was translated as Sha, which could be argued was correct phonetically. But officially, the name had been clarified over the years as Char because Tomino had loosely based him on Charles Aznavour, the French-American singer, actor, and diplomat. Most of the games that exist for Mobile Suit Gundam came long after the television series and the theatrical releases. In 1982, Bandai released a tactical military tabletop game. It came with paintable plastic miniatures, a hex grid starfield map, and all the robot stats you could ask for. Bandai Electronics produced multiple handheld and tabletop electronic games, LCD games, even a handheld LCD game built into the torso of a non-posable Gundam action figure. There were a few PC games, but the real video games would have to wait for technology to catch up. There was an extended period between the release of the theatrical versions of the original series and the ability to watch it outside of Japan. In 1998, the 3 films were released on VHS with English subtitles. 1999 was the 20th anniversary of the franchise and would see the first dubbed version with Michael Lindsay as Amuro and Steve Blum as Char. Gundam first stepped out of Japan in 1980 when it was broadcast in Italy, but it would slowly make its way around the world, finally landing in the US in 2000. Mobile Suit Gundam Wing wasn't the most popular series in Japan, but it was the perfect series to introduce Gundam to the place I'm from, the US of Guns. Some Gundam series and films had been released in the US on VHS, but an entire series had never aired on television, and certainly not with any regularity or a marketing campaign behind it. Cartoon Network changed that with their Toonami block of television. Gundam Wing offered a buffet of different Gundam styles to suit a variety of tastes. It arrived at a time where anime was experiencing a new resurgence in the US, and a generation that had grown up with Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles already understood the team dynamic. 5 suits, 5 distinct personalities, 5 themes. Fight the bad guys. A year later, in 2001, Cartoon Network followed Gundam Wing with the original Mobile Suit Gundam. Heavily edited for the afternoon audience, it didn't perform as well as Wing, but the 2 series did kick off the Gundam toy and model kit market in the West in a big way. After September 11, 2001, there was a concerted effort by television networks to reduce the amount of war-focused content being broadcast, which resulted in the cancellation of Mobile Suit Gundam. Ironic for a series that is so transparently anti-war. Nonetheless, the imagery was considered sensitive at the time. It prevented the final episodes of the series being broadcast. Cartoon Network would try again in 2002, airing it on Adult Swim instead of Toonami, but it was canceled due to low ratings. Mobile Suit Gundam was followed by a lot of Gundam. We could turn this entire channel over to just episodes about the different Gundam series and still have enough material for the next 2 years easy. The story of Char and Amuro continues in the direct sequel, 1985's Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam. From there, it's 1986's Mobile Suit Gundam Double Zeta, which moves on from the Amuro and Char rivalry because Tomino took them over to the 1988 movie Mobile Suit Gundam Char's Counterattack. Char's Counterattack is the final chapter in the Amuro vs. Char rivalry and the end of the Federation vs. Zeon. It was based on a novel by Tomino, and it was both the first completely original Gundam movie and the first Gundam movie or series to use CG graphics, which it did for 5 seconds. And from there, choose your own adventure. You can continue with the Universal Century timeline going into the future with series like Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn, released in 2010, or go back in time to see the events leading up to the 1-year war with Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin, released in 2015. Step into alternate timelines with Mobile Suit Gundam Seed, which is set in the Cosmic Era timeline, which is kind of similar to the Universal Century timeline, but different. The Post-Disaster timeline with Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans. The Future Century timeline with the wackiness of Mobile Fighter G Gundam, or the After Colony timeline with 1995's Mobile Suit Gundam Wing. In 2006, Bandai Entertainment released the English-dubbed version of the series as a 10-disc DVD set. No Japanese audio track because Tomino thought that the television mono recording mix had not survived well enough to use it. However, in 2007, Bandai re-released the series on DVD with new HD masters and the original theatrical mono audio mix. In 2011, Bandai Entertainment once again released the entire series, this time with both English and Japanese audio, but without episode 15 as per usual. When broadcast or sold internationally, Tomino requests that the episode not be released because it has too much material that is off-model. It diminishes the quality of the overall work. Bandai Entertainment shut down in 2012, but in 2015, Sunrise, through Right Stuff Incorporated, released the series again on DVD and on Blu-ray for the first time. Today, through the magic of the internet, you can watch everything except episode 15 on Crunchyroll. Netflix currently has the 3 compilation films. Mobile Suit Gundam has been an internationally recognized brand for over 4 decades, but it has become far more important in Japan. For the Japanese, Gundam is a cultural icon. In 2000, Gundam the Ride opened at Fuji-Q Highland Amusement Park in Fujiyoshida, Yamanashi, Japan. The ride's story puts visitors on an escape pod during the final battle of the One-Year War. Bit dark for a theme park, but still fun. It's a roller coaster of emotions. Gundam the Ride closed in 2007 and was immediately replaced with Gundam Crisis Attraction, which featured a life-size reproduction of Gundam lying flat in the facility. Not as much a ride as a scavenger hunt. Visitors must solve a puzzle with handheld devices to activate Gundam for battle. In 2009, for the 30th anniversary of the franchise, a 59-foot-tall life-size statue of the original Gundam was unveiled in Shiokaze Park in Odaiba. Interesting considering that Odaiba itself is located on an artificial island in Tokyo Bay. The Gundam statue featured working lights, a turning head, and smoke that would billow out of the vents. In 2010, the statue was moved to Shizuoka, the city where most Gundam model kits are made. In 2011, it was damaged in the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. The statue was again disassembled and moved back to Odaiba, where it was displayed in pieces so visitors could get even closer to it than before. In 2012, the fully assembled Gundam returned to Odaiba, this time at Diver City at Tokyo Plaza, with a corresponding indoor theme park and shop. 5 years later, it was replaced by a life-size transforming statue of Unicorn Gundam. But that was not even close to the end of the original Gundam having a significant real presence in Japan. From the moment the original Gundam statue came down, designers and engineers had been developing the next stage in the development of a real mobile suit Gundam. In 2020, a life-size moving Gundam opened at an attraction called the Gundam Factory in Yokohama Bay. Surrounded by a superstructure that adds even more immersive realism, each Gundam performance showcases the Gundam completing a walk cycle before returning to its original rest position. It can raise its arms, open its fingers, turn its head, and even kneel down. In April of 2021, Legendary Entertainment and Netflix announced that Kong Skull Island director Jordan Vogt Roberts was working on a live-action Gundam movie that would be distributed by Netflix. Brian K. Vaughan, writer of both Y: The Last Man and Runaways, as well as the story editor and producer of Lost for seasons 3 through 5, is attached to write and executive produce. Details about the actual plot are unknown at this time. However, Vogt Roberts has said that his goal for the film is, quote, "For all the people who might say, I don't know where to start with Gundam, I want to create this film and give them an access point where you can say, this is where you start. This is your entry point." Mobile Suit Gundam, also known as the First Gundam, Gundam 0079, RX-78-2, Gundam 79, and Grandpa Gundam was the first of many. Many Gundams and many real robots. Shows like Fang of the Sun Dougram in 1981, Macross in 1982, and Armored Trooper Votoms in 1983 all owe their existence and their legacies to the success of Mobile Suit Gundam. Real robots are their own genre of giant robot animation and storytelling, just like super robots. The global impact of Gundam is over 40 years of animation, toys, model kits, movies, games, every kind of licensed merchandise you can imagine. A dedicated fan base that can now make a pilgrimage to see the one that started it all, standing in its home in Yokohama Bay. For Tomino, that statue, like the toy-friendly distortion of his original idea, was problematic. In his own words, "When the project was first explained to me, I'm embarrassed to say I really lacked the imagination to imagine what it would be like, and I was very against the project. You'd have this large object that looked really cheap and tawdry. However, now that I've seen it, I'm really moved, and I feel tremendous strength and power from this huge robot. It really focuses on what I like to call toy-like colors. These toy-like colors don't have the color of real weapons and real tools of destruction. They're peaceful colors, happy colors, the kinds of colors that little kids like. And they are the kinds of colors that encourage people to say, don't give up hope, have great expectations, and have great hopes for the future of humankind." Because Mobile Suit Gundam is not simply a robot story, it is not simply an anime, it is much deeper and much more valuable than that. Despite the modest tone I've taken until now, Gundam is pretty awesome. It took over 2 decades for a cornerstone franchise of Japanese pop culture to make its way to the United States, but when it did, it created a whole new segment of the retail and collectibles market, and it helped break an entrenched system of animation adaptation, ushering in a new era of appreciation for works by Japanese creators in the US. I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Gundam Wing. Gundam Wing is a 49-episode animated series that originally aired on TV Asahi in Japan in 1995, but came to the United States 5 years later on Cartoon Network's Toonami block of programming in 2000. It was part of a surge of Japanese pop culture into the US that began in the late 90s, along with brands like Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z. Thanks in no small part to cable television, the emergence of the internet as a viable means of hobby indulgence, and, strangely enough, the newly implemented TV rating system. In the distant future, humans have created massive orbiting colonies in space. The colonies, full of people who have never lived on Earth, no longer want to be governed by Earth. But Earth literally isn't going to let the colonies go without a fight. The government of Earth, the United Earth Sphere Alliance, maintains their grip on the colonies through military might, with weapons and many of its politicians provided by a group called the Organization of the Zodiac, or Oz for short. While Oz is part of the Earth Alliance military, it is technically owned and operated by a shadowy cabal called the Rockefeller Foundation. To fight back, 5 of the colonies have each sent to Earth a special weapon called a Gundam, a giant heavily armed mech suit distinguished by the advanced Gundanium material they are constructed with, the unique weapons they wield, and the skill of the pilots that control them. Duo Maxwell in the Gundam Death Scythe, Troa Barton in the Gundam Heavy Arms, Katra in the Gundam Sandrock, Wu Fei in the Shenlong, and Hiro Yui in the Wing Gundam. The 5 Gundams are secretly deployed to Earth through Operation Meteor, determined to destroy Oz and all of their weapons of war, freeing the Earth government from the Rockefeller Foundation's grip, and thereby freeing the colonies. Mobile Suit Gundam Wing first aired in Japan in March of 1995 as Shin Kidosenki Gundam Wing, or New Mobile Report Gundam Wing. It was the 6th entry developed as an original television series in the overall Gundam franchise that began with Mobile Suit Gundam in 1979. Mobile Suit Gundam was a revolutionary approach to telling giant robot stories. The market before 1979 had been saturated with magical or godlike super robots. Where the robots came from, how they were created, wasn't as important as defeating the various aliens and giant monsters. Yoshiyuki Tomino created Mobile Suit Gundam to tell a more realistic story about the horrors of war in the future. He wanted to tell a story that demonstrated the impact of war on economies, communities, and the emotional impact of the people who had to fight on the front lines. Mobile Suit Gundam introduced the concept of Gundams as a type of giant piloted mech, but also the storytelling approach to giant robot cartoons that were more grounded in reality. An entire subgenre focused on real robots was born from the efforts to move away from the super robots. Mobile Suit Gundam also kicked off a plethora of Gundam-related merchandise that would keep the franchise growing for decades to come. From comics to toys to clothes to video games, but especially plastic model kits, a product that has become synonymous with the Gundam brand to the degree that it has its own name, a portmanteau of the words Gundam and plastic called Gunpla. Check out our previous video about Mobile Suit Gundam if you want to get into the story of the original series with a little more detail. That said, Gundam Wing is not part of the Mobile Suit Gundam timeline or even that original universe. See, sometimes a franchise can be so popular and last for so long that the creators need to take it in a different direction to keep it fresh and interesting, or to explore new ideas or new interpretations of characters that wouldn't fit within the established narrative. Maybe they want to introduce some new variables, or try to make it accessible to new audiences who didn't connect with the original version, or just out of respect for the original story that has already reached a point of closure. Gundam Wing was the 2nd Gundam series in a row to reinvent what the Gundam franchise could be. The year before, Mobile Fighter G Gundam celebrated the 15th anniversary of the Gundam franchise by turning the whole thing on its head, absolutely abandoning almost everything that made Gundam Gundam, from the real robot sensibilities to the central narrative of politics and the wars that it begets. Mobile Fighter G Gundam was a return to the super robot era, with absurd, colorful designs, fantastic powers, and Gundams utilized as gladiators in a global sporting event instead of weapons in a sprawling space war. G Gundam did exactly the 2 things it was supposed to do. 1, reinvigorate a brand that was losing fan interest, and 2, sell more toys and models and games and all kinds of stuff. Because these shows didn't happen in a vacuum. They are the product of not only writers, designers, directors, and voice actors, but probably most importantly, they are the product of the toy and model companies that sponsor them and license their designs. In this case, Bandai. Bandai is a longtime partner of Sunrise, the company that actually made Gundam Wing, and after Mobile Fighter G Gundam, all parties involved acknowledged that the series could move back toward the original themes a bit, while keeping some of what fans liked about G Gundam, namely multiple Super Gundams with an assortment of cool pilots to choose from. Bandai themselves suggested that maybe the next Gundam series should have a transforming Gundam. That'll sell some toys. After seeing all of the designs for Gundam Wing together, director Masashi Ikeda felt like it covered the spectrum of all the Gundam that had come before it. The drama and political intrigue of the original series were back. There was a range of different Gundams and pilots to suit different tastes. It gave the production the flexibility to do things that were familiar to longtime fans, but push in directions that the franchise had never gone before. To keep the events of various Gundam series straight, Gundam as a franchise has adopted different timelines. 1995's Gundam Wing takes place in a timeline called the After Colony timeline. 1979's Mobile Suit Gundam's timeline, the one with the most entries to date, the one that the franchise inevitably returns to, is the Universal Century timeline. In fact, 4 of the 5 series prior to Gundam Wing take place in the Universal Century timeline. In 1994, Mobile Fighter G Gundam was the first television series to break away from the Universal Century timeline. It takes place in its own individual timeline as well, called Future Century. From there, through today, there have been at least 7 other timelines introduced into Gun canon, including one called Correct Century, featuring mech designs by famed science fiction illustrator Sid Mead, and another called Our Century, featuring a contemporary Earth universe where battles are carried out via a toys-to-life interface that utilizes Gundam model kits as the source of the combatants in a virtual reality game. Gundam Wing wasn't the most popular Gundam series in Japan up to 1995, but it was more popular than Mobile Fighter G Gundam. It was a success. That fan support resulted in multiple manga publications and video games, as well as a 4-episode original video animated series in 1996 called Operation Meteor that retells the events of the Gundam Wing series. And better still, a 3-episode sequel to the original Gundam Wing series in 1997 called Endless Waltz that picks up a year after the final episode. The next year, in 1998, Gundam as a franchise made an attempt to come to the US by way of home video. But in this case, it was 3 compilation movies that distills the original 1979 Mobile Suit Gundam 43-episode series down into a manageable 7.5 hours. It was an attempt to bring the franchise west, but by starting at the beginning. It did not work. Unless you were someone like me who had been out there looking for it since the early 80s, then it was time to order some pizza and forget about all your troubles for a while.
It's a tough mission, but I think you're ready. If we're going to save the colonies, we're going to need top Gundam pilots. Transforming Wing Gundam is the most powerful Gundam in the galaxy. But before you can unleash its full potential, you have to transform it from mobile suit mode to bird mode. That's why we need pilots with an ability to take on Gundam mechanics. To beat the best, you have to be the best.
US television producers and toy companies have been importing Japanese brands for decades, at least as far back as the 1960s with cartoons like Speed Racer, the 70s with Battle of the Planets and Star Blazers. The goal has been to cost-effectively import the work of the Japanese artists while making it fit the rigid US standards for television broadcast and child safety regulations. In many cases, making deliberate attempts to localize or Americanize the properties, dubbing at a minimum, but frequently editing out plot points, political themes, violence, cultural indicators, and characters, sometimes going as far as presenting it as a completely unique American-made product. It's a process that, in some cases, has resulted in the evolution of 2 distinct versions of a brand, one in Japan and one in the US. Voltron and Robotech, 2 prime examples from the 80s, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers in the 90s. All 3 franchises finding themselves tied up in legal battles for decades, trying to figure out who owns the rights to which versions of the franchise or blocking the original version of the property altogether, with the mainstream fan base completely unaware that the original Japanese versions exist at all. Power Rangers originated from a series of Japanese live-action superhero programs called Super Sentai. The first Power Rangers series to air in the United States in 1993 was actually the 16th series in Japan. Super Sentai had been around since 1975. Since Saban Entertainment, then Disney, and now Hasbro had the rights to the Super Sentai programs outside of Japan, any attempt to feature the non-Power Rangers versions of Super Sentai are blocked. Super Sentai only exists in the US today and in the foreseeable future with Power Rangers branding. It is a franchise with its own internal mythology, completely detached from that of its Japanese origin. Gundam Wing is different. Gundam Wing is about as close to the original series as was possible without learning to speak Japanese. In the late 90s, Bandai Entertainment had already successfully brought their products to the US market through programs like Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, among others. They were looking to finally capitalize on the decades of success with Gundam in Japan in the untapped market of the United States. There was a new player in the game that was already airing programming that would complement Gundam perfectly. Cartoon Network launched in 1992 with a library of cartoons from MGM, Hanna-Barbera, and some Looney Tunes. 5 years later, in 1997, two things happened that would finally open the door to Gundam. One, the FCC implemented a new parental guideline system that required the labeling of television programming. While this further limited what could be broadcast to kids during daytime hours, it freed up animation targeting adults in the nighttime hours. And two, Cartoon Network launched a programming block called Toonami, which focused on action-oriented animation targeting kids and young teens from age 9 to 15, featuring shows like Voltron, Sailor Moon, Robotech, Dragon Ball Z, and Ronin Warriors. Bandai presented Gundam as a franchise to Cartoon Network, detailing the dedication of the fanbase and the enduring popularity over decades. Bandai was looking for a partner to help them bring a metric crap ton of merchandise to market in the US. They offered an appetizer of 8 episodes of Gundam Wing for Cartoon Network to consider. Jason DeMarco and Sean Akins, co-creators of the Toonami programming block, jumped at the chance to finally bring Gundam to the US the right way. If nothing else, it would be the perfect complement to Dragon Ball Z, which was already a top performer. In an IGN article from 2020, Jason said it was hard not to be interested in a show involving giant robots. Just watching the 7 or 8 episodes we had, we were like, oh yes, we got to put this on TV. He continued, it was a more realistic approach to using giant robots as weapons of war when compared to the things that we as Americans have been exposed to, which are your Voltrons and all the 70s fun giant robot stuff.
In the distant future, mankind has reached the stars, but the galaxy is troubled.
Bandai Entertainment handled the English dubbing, and the voice performances were conducted by Ocean Productions. After acquiring all of the episodes for the series, the team at Toonami put together a dramatic 2-minute trailer featuring narration by Peter Optimus Prime Cullen, setting up the basics of the series for first-time viewers to get excited and jump in hot. Bandai liked the trailer a lot. They would end up using it to promote the brand itself outside of Toonami for years to come. Toonami planned an unconventional rollout. Given the nature of their 24 hours of cartoon programming, they had the luxury of airing programs at multiple times during the day without compromising other demographics. However, the newly implemented TV rating system would limit what they could actually show in earlier time slots. The solution was to run a safe version of Gundam Wing in the daytime for the younger audience, and an uncut version after midnight for the older audience. And beginning in March of 2000, that's exactly what they did. Daytime audience would get all of the action and drama, but they would lose any depictions of blood, swearing, and adult situations. Nighttime audiences, which could still include younger kids, would get to witness the authentic dubbed Gundam Wing experience, which made it dangerous and cool. By the end of 2000, Gundam Wing was one of the top-rated series on Toonami, leading to the airing of Gundam Wing Endless Waltz, the 3-episode sequel series from 1997. Bandai, ready to continue the expansion of Gundam in the United States, offered up a plethora of other Gundam products, from the original 1979 series to 1994's G Gundam to the brand new, at the time, Gundam Seed. For Cartoon Network, Gundam Wing was a programming blessing. It paired nicely with the other shows and helped power 2 different time slots through the afternoon and evening. But for Bandai, it was about getting merch to the shelves, and that they did. Clothing, stickers, backpacks, cards, games, wall scrolls, posters, walkie-talkies, action figures, and model kits. The same model kits from Japan that had been fueling an economy of tools, paints, magazines, and fan communities for 2 decades. Gunpla model kits were received the same way in the US as they were in Japan. More than a toy, they were an accomplishment. In many cases, less expensive than a toy, and with more accessories and extreme articulation, and without the need for glue. Ready to go out of the box if that's how you wanted to build them. Comics related to Gundam Wing were translations of previously existing manga, some of them telling the stories from the animated series themselves, others filling in the time before, between, and after. Blind Target, Ground Zero, and Battlefield of Pacifists filled in the gaps between the original series and Endless Waltz, some of them published by Tokyo Pop, others by Viz Communications. In 2010, a serialized Gundam novel began publication in the magazine Gundam Ace. New mobile report Gundam Wing Frozen Teardrop was written by Katsuyuki Sumisawa and takes place over 20 years after the events of Endless Waltz in a new timeline called Mars Century, although it does have flashbacks to the events of the After Colony timeline. That same year, Gundam Ace magazine published a serialized novel called New Mobile Report Gundam Wing Endless Waltz, The Glory of Losers. This novel, also written by Sumisawa, is a retelling of the series that also includes bits from Frozen Teardrop. It was released in English in 2017. The original orchestral music of Gundam Wing was released on CDs in Japan beginning in 1995, and in 1996, Gundam Wing made it to home video game systems with Gundam Wing Endless Duel on the Super Famicom. In 2002, Gundam Wing The Battle was released on the Sony PlayStation. If that's not enough, you can hunt down games like Super Robot Wars, Gundam Battle Assault, or Mobile Suit Gundam Extreme Versus, and Dynasty Warriors Gundam, all of which feature various mobile suits from Gundam Wing. All of the episodes of Gundam Wing are available on both VHS and DVD in the United States. If you want the unedited experience, reach for the DVDs. In 2017, Right Stuff released the entire series again on Blu-ray and DVD. Right Stuff also released a collector edition that has the original series Endless Waltz, Operation Meteor, and a picture drama version of the serialized novel Frozen Teardrop. As of this video, you can stream Gundam Wing on Hulu, Crunchyroll, and Funimation. Within 1 week of airing on Cartoon Network, it was already the top-rated show across demographics during the 12 times a week it was airing. It was such a big deal in partnership with Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z that the market for anime, manga, and all related merchandise was finally established in the US. Opening the door for all of the other popular Japanese animated series before Gundam and after to make their way to the US. From Naruto to Full Metal Alchemist, Evangelion to Attack on Titan, Gurren Lagann to My Hero Academia. Nope. Not you, Macross. Yes, anime and manga had been in the US before Gundam Wing, but we're talking about mainstream here, not collector shops or obscure video stores, not tracking down videotapes or downloading a shaky subtitled version. Gundam Wing was everywhere. Big box retail. Heck, today you can buy anime action figures at Walgreens. Gundam Wing model kits are still the most popular kits year after year in the US and Japan. Gundam Wing was rebroadcast in the US in 2011, refreshing it for the generation that saw it for the first time in 2000, offering it up for the first time to a new generation that might not have been exposed to it yet, reinforcing its place as one of the most beloved and important anime franchises in the US. The landscape for anime in the US has changed significantly in the last 20 years. Streaming services like Netflix can afford to offer up ample space without compromising their other offerings. It's just another genre to pick from when endlessly scrolling through the menu. But that normalcy, that acceptance, its placement there at all owes a lot to Gundam Wing. Gundam Wing's path to the US is significant because it marks a transition from the old way of adapting or licensing Japanese series for the US. It helped establish a path for direct importation and mainstream acceptance as close to the original as possible, from the series to the products, and it worked. Maybe all it took was a team of giant superhero robots to get the US audience on board. Gundam Wing was a big deal in Japan, but there are series before and after that are still more popular there. No Gundam series since Gundam Wing has been received the same way in the US. For the mainstream US audience, Gundam Wing is Gundam. For decades, superheroes around the world have overwhelmingly been marketed to young boys dreaming about becoming powerful men, with transformative abilities that grant them control over their world and heaps of appreciation to validate their existence. For decades, the market failed to recognize that young girls like that stuff too, and there's just as much money to be made, if not more, selling it to them. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon is a lot. It's comics, it's multiple animated series over the course of decades. It's toys, it's clothes, it's books, it's games, it's cards. There are at least 2 different kinds of Sailor Moon cooking timers. We cannot possibly cover all of it in a single video, so we aren't even going to try. What we will cover here is the story of where all of this stuff started and the how and when it arrived in the US, because it happened more than once, and it was almost a very different thing than what it ultimately became. Sailor Moon is about a young teenage girl originally named Usagi Tsukino, Serena in some adaptations, who meets a black cat named Luna that introduces her to a world of magic and adventure. When she transforms into Sailor Moon, she becomes a powerful superhero fighting against the evil Dark Kingdom led by Queen Beryl. Sailor Moon joins forces with the other Sailor Guardians, Sailor Mercury, Sailor Mars, Sailor Jupiter, and Sailor Venus, a team of magical girls each with their own special powers on a quest to find the legendary Silver Crystal. They are superheroes learning about what their true purpose is in the universe, while simultaneously doing their best to make it through the very complicated and difficult world of their teenage lives, falling in love, wearing pretty things, and kicking ass. Sailor Moon was created by Naoko Takeuchi in 1991. Like a lot of other kids, Naoko dreamed of becoming a comic book artist. She joined the astronomy club and hung out with all the other kids who read comics. You know, the cool kids. Her father counseled a more pragmatic approach. Go to college, get a degree, make sure you can get a real job if you can't do comics. That's good advice that lots of parents give their kids. Mine did. Naoko listened to hers. I didn't listen to mine. Naoko went to school for chemistry at Kyoritsu University of Pharmacy, where she got a degree in chemistry. She completed her thesis on the heightened effects of thrombotic actions due to ultrasound and got a license to practice pharmaceutical medicine. I have some very funny stories about the ways I quit different jobs.
It's true. All of it.
In Japan, comics are known as manga, but the term applies to a much broader range of comics-based media. Unlike the US market, comics are a much more widely socially acceptable entertainment medium with genres and subgenres targeting different demographics. For example, shonen essentially means boy or youth. Shonen manga are comics targeted at young boys. Some of the most popular pop culture brands in Japan and around the world started in shonen manga. Shoujo in this context means young woman. Shoujo manga are comics targeted at young girls. Some of the most popular pop culture brands in Japan and around the world started in shoujo manga. In terms of subject matter, all manga can feature any genre for a particular story or series. The distinction between shonen and shoujo is who the intended target audience is. Sailor Moon is a shoujo manga because it was originally intended for young girls. Takeuchi wanted to make a comic about superhero girls in space, magical adventures, fighting monsters and evil. It was her editor who suggested the sailor suit costume inspired by the uniforms commonly worn by girls in school. Her first comic was called Codename Sailor V. It was about a young girl named Minako Aino who meets a white cat named Artemis who introduces her to the world of magic and adventure. Artemis gives her a crescent moon compact and a magic pen. With them, Minako becomes Sailor Venus and travels out into the world to find the other Sailor Guardians and the Moon Princess. Codename Sailor V first appeared in August of 1991 as a one-shot in a special edition comic anthology magazine called Run Run. The comic was so popular it was picked up as a regular series in Nakayoshi, a larger comic magazine by the same publisher. And furthermore, it ultimately attracted the attention of Toei Animation, who were interested in adapting it for an animated series. Toei was already well-versed in the magical girl genre. Heck, it practically invented it. Shows that focus on young girls with magical powers who can transform into more powerful beings while keeping their real identities secret. But before Toei could move forward on Codename Sailor V, they wanted to work with Takeuchi to see if they could broaden the appeal for the TV audience. Keep the core the same, but make it more merchandisable. The toy companies are very important to financing the production of shows for kids in Japan. In this case, Bandai, one of the largest toy companies in the world. Influenced by popular Super Sentai series of live-action superhero television shows, Takeuchi changed the focus of the series from Sailor Venus to the team of sailors. And instead of Venus as the focus, the new face and name of the franchise was Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon, the shoujo manga, started off very similar to Codename Sailor V, except this time it's Luna the cat, a young girl named Usagi Tsukino, and the superhero identity of Sailor Moon. She leads the team of sailors in the battle against evil, the quest for the Silver Crystal, and the defense of the solar system. Takeuchi continued to produce the Sailor Moon comic while the animated series was in production in order to retain a degree of creative direction over the whole thing. Sailor Moon the comic hit shelves in December of 1991. Toei's animated adaptation first aired just a few months later in March of 1992. Originally conceived as a single arc, the popularity of the comic, the animated series, and the merch dictated otherwise. Toei pressed Takeuchi to continue the series beyond her original intended ending. She wanted to kill off all the heroes. Toei wanted to figure out a way to bring them back. 4 additional arcs were developed by Takeuchi, with the comics running just a few months ahead of the cartoons. Sailor Moon quickly became one of the most popular and most lucrative brands in Japan, making Takeuchi a lot of money. But it would also force Takeuchi to question to what degree she was sacrificing her own creative voice to the people working on the animated series. How much the characters and their voices were changed, the way the characters were depicted by a studio full of male creators. Something to think about while she drove her Porsche to work. Toei developed 3 animated feature films as well as television specials and short films. The series ran for 200 episodes over 5 seasons from 1992 through 1997. There's a lot of bouncing around in the timeline between different media. There are guides available online to help you navigate the proper watch order if you need them. The popularity of the Super Sentai series in Japan impacted Sailor Moon well beyond the development of the Toei animated series. By 1993, Super Sentai had produced 16 different seasons, featuring 16 different themed teams since 1975. None of which had been able to break into the US television and merchandise market. That changed in 1993 when Saban Entertainment and Fox Kids successfully adapted the 1992 Super Sentai series Kyoryu Sentai Ju Ranger as Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. What followed was a deluge of properties rushing to take advantage of an audience that was starving for more Power Rangers, and a bunch of studios that wanted to replicate the low-cost, quick turnaround process that Saban had used to produce the series and stock the shelves. A decades-old method of taking existing Japanese footage, removing all the direct references to Japan and Japanese culture, re-record all the dialogue, reshoot out-of-costume scenes where necessary, import and rebrand all of the existing merchandise. Get rich in the 90s. That's Business 101, baby. So, in 1993, Renaissance Atlantic Entertainment, one of the production partners on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, began working on a way to develop a similar product for girls. Renaissance believed that Sailor Moon could be that property. Standards and practices are a lot more strict in the US, and culturally there was a lot of stuff in Sailor Moon that they didn't think would translate. In order to make it work in the US, it would need significant changes. Changes that Toei wasn't interested in making. Without the rights to the animated series, but with Bandai interested in selling their existing Sailor Moon toys in the US, Renaissance began developing a spiritually similar but wholly different kind of Sailor Moon show. Renaissance Atlantic, independent of Bandai, reached out to Toon Makers, a new animation studio, to collaborate on a pilot. The plan was to reimagine Sailor Moon as a hybrid live-action and animated series. They produced a 17-minute proof-of-concept short that showcased the now live-action show that switches to animation when the characters transform into the Sailor Guardians. The animation is heavily westernized, attempting to mimic the style that Filmation popularized on shows like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Luna is now a white cat, the cast is more diverse, and to really drive home the point, the girls can now fly through space on their space sailboards. Toei considered the concept for a hot second, and then declined, citing the cost of whatever this was, as opposed to just, I don't know, redubbing the original series as is. The only known footage was shown as a 2-minute trailer to the crowd at Anime Expo in 1995, and the only reason we've seen that is because fans recorded it themselves. The attempted live-action reimagining has been referred to by some as Saban Moon, even though Saban Entertainment technically had nothing to do with it. It did convince Toei that a partnership with DiC Animation was the better path to bring Sailor Moon to the US and Canada.
Don't touch that remote, or Queen Barrel might zap your TV and turn it into a jelly donut. Yum. Be right back.
Grandi avventure, grandi Sailor Moon.
Grandi?
Sì, sono più grandi per te.
Ma quanto grandi?
43 centimetri.
E quante sono?
Sailor Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus. Sono le 5 paladine della giustizia, ma più grandi. Ehi Sailor, sono qui. Sailor Moon, sei grandissima. Sailor Moon giganti sono solo giochi preziosi, le uniche, le originali.
In 1995, Toei licensed the first 2 seasons of Sailor Moon to DiC Productions, who brought in Optimum Productions to handle the dubbing into English. Which burned Renaissance Atlantic founder Frank Ward because right out of the gate, DiC and Optimum had to censor the show the way that Toei wouldn't allow Frank and Renaissance to do previously. DiC's edits to Sailor Moon started with the opening theme. The original theme song, Moonlight Densetsu, or Moonlight Legend, was re-recorded with different lyrics attempting to set the expectations for the show as a more straightforward Western superhero fare. As opposed to the Japanese focus on the love story between Usagi or Serena as Sailor Moon and the mysterious Tuxedo Mask, aka Mamoru Chiba, aka Darian Shields in the DiC version. Other significant edits to the series include removing any and all nudity, reducing the violence, modifying outfits, changing character names, rewriting dialogue, and most importantly, reinterpreting relationships between characters. What I can say is that DiC is notorious for having altered the characters and relationships that did not fit the expected heterosexual dynamic that was allowed to be broadcast to the target demographic at the time. In the original series, Sailor Uranus and Neptune are lovers. In the DiC version, they are cousins. Somehow, that was considered better.
And now she's coming here. Sailor Moon is #1 in France, Italy, Spain, Hong Kong, and Japan. Bigger than Power Rangers and Turtles combined. We're talking serious moon power. Blast off for the moon. Sailor Moon. Coming this fall from DiC.
The DiC Sailor Moon adaptation premiered in Canada in August of 1995 and in the US in September. After 2 months, they had nearly exhausted all of the 82 episodes they could potentially air. By November, with 17 episodes left to adapt, production was halted and the series was canceled due to low ratings. In the US, networks were airing it in early morning and afternoons, assuming that it was the younger kids that were going to be watching, while in Canada, it performed better airing during prime time. Mainstream networks in the US weren't ready for anime, but the fans were if the networks could figure out when to program for them. Modern Japanese cartoons weren't considered a serious option for the US at the time, but the fans were hungry for it. They were desperate and taking extreme measures to watch anything that was being produced, importing, sharing, circulating VHS tapes recorded directly off Japanese television, including the original uncut broadcasts of Sailor Moon. When the DiC adaptation was canceled, the fans went to work. They started a campaign called Save Our Sailors, with the goal of convincing DiC to finish the last 17 episodes and bring it back to broadcast. Using the tools they had, they began buying up products from the brands that had sponsored Sailor Moon while it was on the air, like Pop-Tarts. They bought a lot of Pop-Tarts. And it worked, but not really. While the Save Our Sailors campaign was underway, Irwin Toys and General Mills had already been working to complete the series and bring it back through General Mills' subsidiary, the Program Exchange, a company that deals specifically with television syndication and program distribution. 2 years after it was canceled, in June of 1997, Sailor Moon was back on the air in the US at the USA Network. The final 17 episodes of the DiC adaptation aired for the first time in Canada in November of 1997. And in June of 1998, the full series, including the last 17 episodes, were part of the Toonami programming block on Cartoon Network. This was the missing piece for so many years. Traditional US syndication couldn't match the precision targeting and audience focus of cable and programming blocks like Toonami. In 1998, DiC's rights to the Sailor Moon series expired. Sailor Moon was far more popular in the US than it had ever been. Frank Ward decided to take another shot with Toei. He felt particularly empowered after DiC's adaptation had been canceled in 1995. He felt validated because he still believed live action was the only way for Sailor Moon to break through to the degree that Power Rangers had. He still believed that there was a place in the market for a show like the one that they had previously developed, maybe with a few tweaks. And look, he wasn't totally wrong. While he was trying to get a live-action show made for the US market, Sailor Moon was starring in live-action musicals on stage in Japan. There was precedent. Beginning in 1993, there would eventually be over 800 performances, with the first 500 produced by Bandai from 1993 to 2005. Frank Ward, this time without tune makers or any animation at all, headed the development of a new live-action adaptation, or at least a show inspired by Sailor Moon that he called Team Angel. That said, it strays so far from the look, feel, tone, and quality of Sailor Moon that it doesn't even succeed in being a knockoff. It is really something else. Toei passed again. But there were other things working behind the scenes. In 1993, DiC had merged with parts of the ABC television network, and then a few years later in 1996, that entity was purchased by Disney, along with DiC's entire library, including their adaptation of Sailor Moon. In 1998, Disney and DiC began developing live-action features. They released Meet the Deedles in 1998 and Inspector Gadget in 1999. It is likely that Sailor Moon would have been next on the list. A 1997 article in Variety mentions that director Stanley Tong was set to direct the live-action adaptation, hot off the heels of his 1997 success with Mr. Magoo starring Leslie Nielsen. It never happened because in 2000, DiC was purchased back from Disney by original owner Andy Hayward, backed by Bain Capital and Chase Capital Partners. And besides, DiC only owned the rights to the first 2 seasons of Sailor Moon in the US, and Toei had already licensed seasons 3 and 4 to Cloverway, a US-based media licensing agent that specialized in Japanese animation and manga. By 1999, Cloverway had already established themselves as a partner on multiple projects with Toei. In 1999, Cloverway brought Optimum Productions back to the project to work on the English dubs just like they had for DiC back in 1995. This time there was a lot less editing of the content now that the audience had been established as being older and the distribution was either cable via Toonami in the US or home video. The new Cloverway dub aired in 2002 on Toonami, meaning that 4 of the 5 original Sailor Moon seasons had officially been broadcast in the US. They weren't able to do the final season despite strong ratings because Cloverway was never able to renew the license. Sailor Moon was on a path in the US where so many changes had been made that the new product is different from the original. Macross and Super Sentai cannot exist in markets that Robotech and Power Rangers have claimed. Naoko was concerned about the changes that were being made by Toei to Sailor Moon in Japan. It was even worse in the US and Canada. In 2009, approaching the 20-year anniversary of the original animated series, Sailor Moon saw a resurgence in popularity around the world, driven by its broadcast on Animax, a Japanese satellite television network dedicated to anime, as well as Toei's licensing of Sailor Moon to international markets where it had never aired. In 2014, Viz Media announced that they had acquired the rights to Sailor Moon, including the 3 films and television specials, thus allowing them to release for the first time uncut restored versions of the first 89 episodes that DiC had previously produced. Studiopolis was contracted to redub the entire series, which began streaming on Neon Alley and Hulu. 2 years later, it was available on Tubi TV with original Japanese audio as well. Sailor Moon has been one of the most successful merchandising brands around the world for several decades. If you can think of a product that can be licensed, that Toei could put the sailors on, it probably exists. Comics, toys, kids' costumes, and plenty of other. Bandai and Banpresto produced several video games that are mostly available in Japan. In 1997, the 3D Adventures of Sailor Moon was released in the US, and that follows the DiC adaptation. In 1999, Tokyopop released a series of novels written by Stu J. Levy and Leanne Centaur that are generally in the DiC universe as well. In 2000, the DiCverse also got a collectible card game from Dart Flip Cards, which, by the way, is my new bounty hunting name. Long out of print, it allowed players to fight as Sailor Scouts against various monsters and villains. In 2003, Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon, produced by Toei, was broadcast on Japanese television. It was a live-action Sailor Moon show just like the Super Sentai series that had been running since 1975, just like Frank Ward was trying to develop for the US since 1993. It ran for 49 episodes and was released on DVD along with 2 additional films. It retells the origins of Sailor Moon and the other sailors, introduces many of the familiar characters from the series. I don't know if Frank Ward has ever seen it, or if he ever wants to. The DiC adaptation of Sailor Moon was released on VHS. It is not only obviously out of print, but also considered defunct at this point. No longer recognized as even a valid English dub considering all the changes that were made. Sailor Moon was released on DVD in 2002. Viz Media released their version on DVD and Blu-ray beginning in 2014. A 25th anniversary Blu-ray collection was released in 2017. Sailor Moon continued to grow decade after decade with new ways for new generations of fans to pick up the series. In 2014, Sailor Moon Crystal was released as an original net animation celebrating the 20th anniversary of the series. It takes the series back to the real roots, pulling its inspiration from the comics rather than the animated series. In 2014, Viz Media released the English language version on Neon Alley and Hulu. Crunchyroll broadcast their own version in partnership with Toei directly. And just last year in 2021, Sailor Moon Eternal was released, essentially a 4th season of Sailor Moon Crystal. Both Crystal and Eternal are available to stream on Netflix as of this video. 2022 will see a Sailor Moon 30th anniversary merchandising and collaboration extravaganza across Japan that will certainly bleed into every other market around the world. The fandom is the biggest it has ever been, and there are far more resources for selling the product to focused demographics. Sailor Moon played a prominent role in bringing anime and manga to the world in general as part of a late 90s, early 2000s expansion to other markets. But it played a much more specific role in the growth of anime and manga targeted to female fans. A genre previously dominated and controlled by dudes was opening up to more women creators and stories focused on girls and women as the heroes, fighting the monsters, controlling their own destinies, empowering future generations. Sailor Moon helped move the entire industry to recognize the power of the fanbase that Naoko Takeuchi's characters had connected with, what kinds of stories they wanted to read and watch, who they wanted to see in those stories, and what they were willing to buy. The magical girl genre took off, riding the success of Sailor Moon, navigating the path she charted for others to follow, the genre itself being subdivided into different magical girl tastes for different demographics, from Magic Knight Ray Earth to Wedding Peach to Smile Precure. Sailor Moon has sold tens of millions of books worldwide, sold tens of billions of dollars worth of merchandise. It is not just one of the most successful shoujo manga, it is one of the most successful comics and franchises ever created, period. It was not only able to expand out into other markets around the world, but it survived those attempts to ultimately be restored to its original content and persist nonetheless. The successive relaunches, reimaginings, and re-releases, true descendants of the original brand instead of their safe westernized echoes. This is not Robotech. This is not Power Rangers. This is Sailor Moon. Thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you very much to those of you who already are. Check us out on Twitch at twitch.tv/toygalaxy. If you're in the position to help the channel grow, if you would like early access to the videos ad-free, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/toygalaxy. And if you made it all the way through this compilation, first of all, thank you. And second, comment with the secret code Crabman in man mode so that we know you watched all the way to the end. Cut.